to be with us, to help us have a fruitful deliberation. And when it's time for us to depart, we kindly ask you to bless us and help us reach our different destinations safely. We pray all this through our God. Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you very much. My co-moderator is called Gender Fancy. Is the last name Leka or Laker? Laker. And my name myself, I have been introduced, but I will repeat it. My name is Agatha Atwaire. And now we are going to sing the anthems before we sit. And we'll start with the national anthem.
Can we have a student to lead us through the anthems? Simon, can you lead us through the anthems? It's an honor.
I thought the media team would actually help, but he will need a microphone if we need.
Okay.
Do we have? We can sing it ourselves if they can't help. So Simon can lead us.
Oh, Uganda,
may God upon thee, we lay our future in thy hand. United, free, for liberty, together we always stand. The East African anthem, we need the media team to help us with that. I am not sure we all know it by heart. Okay, can someone lead us into it then? Jumuiya Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tufikie malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu tutake uilinde, tuadilishe, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, jumuiya yetu. Should we sing just one stanza? You guys, this is too much work. It's been a long time. Technology had made things easy, but we may take our seats now. And then, thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a long time since I had to sing those songs. But we welcome you, our judges of today, and I'm going to introduce you to the audience, so that I will kindly ask that whoever whose name I read should stand up and wave at our audience and panelists. We have Miss Fatoumata Toure. You're welcome. We have Mr. Joseph Ocheno. You're welcome, sir. We have Mr. Chanwat Brian. You are welcome. I am very sorry I didn't get the lady's name. I'm going to give you a microphone and you remind people their name. Oh, she's our guest.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. My name is Shukri Mohammed. I'm a master's student at Syracuse University in New York in the USA. It's nice to see you all this morning.
No, another round of applause for our guest. You're welcome. We are ready to start. So we have group one already here. Our panelists, you're very welcome. I hope you feel at home and at ease and you're not nervous. If you need to first inhale and exhale, you are free to do that so that we start. I'm going to first ask Temian to move around and give give out placards of universities to the people that might want to ask you questions so that we get a way of identifying whoever has a question. I'm going to read out the universities we have here so that if we have one for each one of them, we give it out. Uganda Pentecostal University. So if you're more than one from and seated in different places, you can always identify who wants to ask a question on your behalf. And oh, they sit together. I didn't know you people do that. It's supposed to be interactive. Yeah. Okay. So Makerere University. IU, Islamic University in Uganda. Mbararara University. Cavendish University. Nkumba University. We have Uganda Christian University. Uganda Martyrs University. Uganda Martyrs. Then we have Busitema. Busitema University. Jamian, Busitema is here. Kabale University. Makerere University Business School. And then Kampala International University. Kampala International University. Do you have a university I have not read here? Yeah, I did. I did. They are seated behind there. Yeah, I think we are ready to start, unless Jamian says there's something that we need to do first. So once again, my name is Agatha Taire, and I am moderating this panel with Jenna. You guys have met Jenna, but don't worry, I am as much fun. You won't have anything to worry about. So we are going to start, and I'm going to allow the gentleman who came in to catch a breath. So I'm going to start from the lady. So I'm going to start with the lady. I don't know why we have not yet done a good job of having 50% representation of the ladies yet. But well, we are going in the next season. Dr. Sarah Birete and Damian, how do you have a strategy of preventing this? We are going to try our best. So I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and also start with your very mini presentation about the topic which we are starting with, which is gender equality in Uganda. Yes. So gender equality, opportunities and challenges. We are going to time. Oh, yes. No. I am so sorry. that must have felt so bad that I'm giving a topic you haven't prepared for. So sorry about that. I have looked at a different. So we are going to discuss digital rights, emerging technologies, and the fourth industrial revolution, and the role of the youth. You're going to have, no, that's the topic. Well, we will have to discuss it, but let's start with what you have. It is part of it. I am the moderator now. I'm not going to allow people to say it's not the topic again. I allowed just once, yeah? So I'm going to give you first 2 minutes uninterrupted to tell us about that topic. And then the rest of the 3 minutes, I will allow anyone who wants to interject, to complement, or to supplement. Okay, please, let's start. You start by telling us your name, and then a brief introduction of the topic. Yes. Do you want to stand here? Yes.
Right before you start, I'm going to be timing you, so you pay attention to timing. I'll notify you when you've used your first 2 minutes to show you that you are now entering your unprotected time, and your fellow panelists can ask points of information. So the points of information you can ask in the last 3 minutes. So I will notify you and show you this, meaning you've used your first 2 minutes. And then I'll again notify you when you have 5 seconds left. When I do this, you must leave the podium. Are we together? You can start.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Keiyuba Jenna from the Islamic University in Uganda, main campus. The topic is digital rights, emerging technologies, and climate justice. The role of the youth in that aspect. Ladies and gentlemen, digital rights mean freedom. They are linked to the freedom of expression and privacy. But it as a topic mean the rights that allow people to access, use, create, and have privacy over digital media and as well publish it. So recently in 2016, the United Nations General Assembly made the digital rights part of the human right. They recognized digital rights as human rights. So when we talk about digital rights, we expect anyone to understand that it is part of the human rights we are having. So ladies and gentlemen, when we are discussing about digital rights, we deal with electronic technology, we deal with aspects, like we deal with technology in aspects of education, industrialization, in aspects of research and innovation, among others, the medical sector. That's what we talk about when we talk about digital rights, or what we are going to discuss with digital rights in relation to those fields. So in 2021, March 13th, we had a report from the director, the executive director of, pardon. We had a report from the executive director, Dorothy Mukasa, about the state of digital rights and the governance in Uganda. And she quoted and noted that we have had a lot of development in usage of internet currently in Uganda, with the highest percentage going to Facebook. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, currently Facebook, you cannot access Facebook without VPN, limited usage of. So the current status of digital rights is that they are limited in Uganda. The fact that Facebook, you have to use VPN. We have smartphones that have only a memory capacity of 8 GB. 8 GB cannot accommodate a VPN and cannot accommodate other apps as well. Therefore, you cannot use Facebook for a phone that has 8 GB. When we talk about the second part of the topic is about emerging technologies. When we talk about emerging technologies, these refer to the new technology, but may also refer to the technology that is keeping on evolving. So this technology is also categorized, just like I talked about digital rights in those aspects. It's also part of, you can talk about education technology. It's also in forms of education, information, and a lot others, like in the health sector, many other forms of technology that are emerging. So among some of them are the AI, the artificial intelligence, we have the robots, we have many others that we shall mention maybe when I'm answering questions, because I only have 5 minutes. And then we talk about the we talk about climatic justice. For us to realize that there is climatic justice, ladies and gentlemen, we have to first understand that there is climatic injustice. So when you talk about climatic justice, we have to understand that climate currently is not as stable as it has to be. So we are living in a world where we have a lot of global warming, desertification, and many other things. So when you talk about climate justice, it's the ability or it's the expression of limiting the expansion of those climatic injustices that are happening in Uganda or in the globe at large. However, my standard, I'll stand with Uganda because Uganda is my land and it's my country that I wish to change before I extend to the outside world. And I'm talking about the youths, because we ought to talk about the youths. So when I'm talking about the youths, I'll deal with the various definitions of youths. The UN defines youth to be between 15 to 35. Other countries define a youth to be 18 to 35, others 20. So youths vary in different countries. However, in Uganda, we have youths ranging from 18 years to 35 years. So when I talk about the role of the youths, recognizing the fact that human rights, when you talk about digital rights or emerging technologies, we all have to have, because the fact that we are here for the change of Uganda, we expect that we are going to talk about the rights of people in relation to these. So when I talk about digital rights, we have to realize the fact that these rights have sources. We have sources of rights. And the sources we have include the Constitution and other written laws. We have the conventions or the treaties that we enter in, like the United Nations. It binds us because we have a treaty that engages us in such. Then we have also the humanity or Ubuntuism. So when we talk about the rights, we don't talk about only the rights that are in the Constitution, but as well we recognize the conventions, recognize the Ubuntuism, your humanity. You realize that when you're human, you make sure that, this person has to be as comfortable as possible. So ladies and gentlemen, I would like to rest my case if I made any.
So I'll take it that there were no questions or any interruptions up to that moment for her. None? Okay, so I wanted to first harmonize something very little, and then we...
Panelists, why were there no questions? Are you telling us you all agree with her? Ms. Jenna, did you convince them that much? Okay. I can see the gentleman seated in front was scared of the lady who presented earlier. We'll assume you agreed with her. Okay, let's welcome our second panelist who is going to present, and that is Mr. Sam Baluku, representing Uganda Pentecostal University. Please give him a round of applause. If you're not clapping, I'll pick you to come and represent Uganda Pentecostal University. Let's see someone who is being jealous. Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Baluku, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Our dear judges, my fellow panelists, are most obliged. My name is Baluku Sam, representing the Uganda Pentecostal University. Our topic is digital rights, emerging technologies, and climate justice, and we are looking at the role of the youth. Ladies and gentlemen, I want us to address our minds to the digital rights. And these are human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use and create or publish digital media, or to access and use computers and other electronic networks and communication networks. And I want us to know that a number of studies by the Human Rights Watch continue to show that the current status quo, for example, if we build our case on Uganda, there's an increase in digital right violations. A number of studies by the Human Rights Watch show that Uganda currently there's an increase in characterized arrests and intimidation of online users. We look at internet blockages, technological advancement that undermine the drive to socio-economical and political development in Uganda. Ladies and gentlemen, I want us to address our mind to Article 35 of the Constitution, to Section 35 of the Access to Information Act 205 that protects third parties whose information is subject to disclosure. We also go to climate justice, which is just the equity in sharing and adopting the burdens brought by climate change. Climate justice, ladies and gentlemen, is a concept that addresses the just division, fair sharing, and equitable distribution of the benefits and burdens of climate change. It also deals with the responsibilities that come along. Ladies and gentlemen, I want us to address our minds to climate justice, whereby we all have a role to play, whether as policymakers, business leaders, or investors. And we all know that Africa...
You have a point of information.
Thank you. I want to ask Baluku. The majority of the demographic dispensation of Uganda are young people, the youth, and these are the people that want to innovate, and these are the very creative people that want to access internet with very expensive data charges and with restrictive access to internet. The only thing we can know is that there is limited access to internet, and for that matter, the rights are restrained. So as a young thinker, for example, a student, what would you suggest as a metric for why we make that, or how we make that as inclusive as possible? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Basically, one of the suggestions I would bring about is coming together as young people, form groups, put our grievances to the responsible organizations and government, and perhaps our voices will be heard. Like we are conducting a debate like this one that is on record. I guess it can help us put our grievances, present our grievances. Ladies and gentlemen, I was also still addressing myself to climate justice, which is a concept that addresses the just division, a fair sharing and equitable distribution of the benefits and burdens of climate change. Climate justice is an ethical, legal, and political issue, rather than that is purely environmental and physical in nature. Climate justice is part of the SDG 13 of the UN Agenda of 2030. It is also a fundamental aspect. So as we discussed today, we're also going to look at the 2017 UN Environmental Program that identified that, that currently there are over 894 cases or legal actions that are taking place worldwide in as far as issues to do with climate justice is concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, I want us to address our minds to... Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baluku. You can take your seat. It seems the questions were done for now. They're going to come back later. We are going to have more questions. I am going to now welcome Mr. Edgar Mutungisa to take the floor. And I'm going to repeat that you have the first 5 minutes to make your case. And in those minutes, the 3 minutes will be for your panelists, if any, to interject. And interjections are only allowed if they are justifiable, reasonable, and urgent. Yeah? So please.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm the moderator. I'm Edgar Mutungisa from University of Science and Technology. I'm a student of petroleum engineering. So today's topic is digital rights, emerging technologies, and climate justice. We need to understand a few things. I think largely the other panelists have clarified maybe a little on how these rights look like. But it's very important to recognize that the largest consumers of digital technology are youth. I mean, demographically, because that's where the world is turning. It's very important also to recognize that the world is turning to be progressive, digital, and a global village. What that's important, it means that for any sort of right we talk about in this context, ought to have some sort of like regional or global backing, and not just in isolation. Very important for the next submissions as a context. Beyond that, we also need to understand that when we speak about digital rights, just for you to have a picture of what this looks like, it is just like some sort of an enhanced normal human rights just in a digital environment. After recognition that because the world is shifting that way, that even in that space, just though we interact within human spaces, we have some rules that govern our interaction. In a normal physical environment, we ought also to have some rules that govern our interaction even in those digital spaces. That's what digital rights can mean ideally. Now, we have some legal framework to start with. We have some sort of things like the Computer Misuse Act 2011. We also have the trademark and the IP Act. We also have, we have some sort of different laws, I think, you know, at a local context. But beyond that, we also have some level of backing in terms of law at a global context. And that's why the first problem is. The problem is that at the global context, we only have some sort of a UN resolution assembly that was non-binding, 16, passed. The problem with that resolution was twofold. One, it's non-binding anyway. But number two, it focused more on the idea that the government ought not sabotage your access to internet, but it did not necessarily make the government have a responsibility to provide that internet access. Now, why is internet access very important for this context, as I said? Because we cannot discuss digital rights when we do not have digital access to start with. Then the debate wouldn't have any sort of sense. Because the idea is you can best engage and have those rights or be able to actually be able to engage them when you already have the digital access. That's why we ought to discuss the question of internet access fundamentally for the next sort of discussions. And I think I'm going to expand more on that. So globally, there is some sort of that soft law, because even its sort of genesis is from Article 19 on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, again, which is considered soft law, and the fact that the governments don't have
question for you.
background. It's
I don't know what it is. Question, information.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Okay, so Edgar, I think your discussion has been quite very elaborative on soft law. Okay, so what's then the position of your argument in light of binding treaties such as the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which actually are binding on states under the treaty-based system of the United Nations?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. I think generally why international law is considered soft law is that largely it's let alone based on the idea of goodwill. That the idea that states still have sovereignty in a way still poses some sort of a threat, even when there is some sort of universal law. But still the importance of universal law is simple. It's the idea that when the universal law or some sort of universal structures come in place, they come along with other structures that are not necessarily governmental, that could in a way push you the right direction. For instance, when there's a declaration from the UN that is binding, there is one incentive for the state to act on it, to domesticate that, but beyond that, it comes with some rise like of activism, like different activist organizations that are not necessarily limited by the government. So either way, you need both. That whereas you need to domesticate those laws, but you also need to have some sort of backing from the international level for you to be able to have that sort of global, perspective. So beyond that, we need then to understand that beyond access, we have issues of security. We know, for instance, currently we had Facebook being sued on instances of data mining, where it was selling some sort of data for political reasons, but also we had some like claim where it was using that data to fuel some sort of genocide, right? In that instance of Lemire. So that the extent to which our privacy is, respect within those digital spaces is a very big concern. I think I'm going to elaborate that in the next discussion. 5 minutes are very few. But beyond that, we need to also look at the issue of jurisdiction. It's very important because, for instance, the Computer Misuse Act that we have, Section 5 particularly, has some sort of backlash already. The idea that annoying the president is an offense, right? So there's been a lot of ambiguity to what qualifies as that anonymity. But now, okay, I think I'm going to stop there, but next 5 minutes are going to be more interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I want to take this opportunity to welcome our other judge, Dr. Deus Kamanyu. Thank you for being with us here. And I didn't hear any round of applause for that presentation. Am I the only one who found it? I think I'm going to tell the audience, hold on to your questions. Every presenter, write down a question, comment, whatever you have for them. We'll get back to you. But for now, let me call Jenna to come back and take on the next presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Edgar, for that presentation. We are going to welcome our fourth panelist for today, and that is Mr. Aruho Brian from Cavendish University. Let me see who is not clapping. Someone who is not clapping? Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Brian, you have the floor.
Before Aruho starts, the gentleman, Garang, right? I don't get when you do this what you mean, if you're happy or you want to say something, so it's a bit interrupting. Yep, I don't know if you can comment them in another way. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aruho Brian, and I'm representing Cavendish University, Uganda, in the Center for Constitutional Governance, InterUniversity Interface Championship semifinals. Very honored to be here, and still very honored to be one of the panelists that passed through. Well, first and foremost, maybe to the House, in case anyone doesn't know what we are discussing about. When we discuss about digital rights, emerging technologies, and climate justice, in particularly the role of the youth. Whereas my brother, the former panelist, hit some light on youth, because I know he's a youth activist, I feel that before we start this debate, we need to first know the definition of the youth. Looking from the international scope and coming back to our own jurisdiction, and also in the spirit of Pan-Africanism, also looking at what the African Union states about it. Secondly, we'll also have to address our minds very keenly to digital rights. Digital rights are presumed by very many people in very, very ununderstandable ways, depending on the jurisdiction you come from. From the country I come from, that is the Republic of Uganda, when you stand up and you become a digital rights activist, the government in power will presume that you're a human rights activist. And what has happened to the tale of human rights activists in this country is that it's very horrible. In the recently concluded presidential campaigns, most of you will testify with me that Facebook was closed. Maybe they thought we were threatening them. Maybe they thought a lot of information was passing through. So, do we still have the morality? Do we even have the authority to tell people that we have digital rights in Uganda? No. It's more of telling a Disney tale to young children and promising them heaven, yet we are living in absolute hell. Those are things we shall have to look at. Emerging technologies. Now, we can't talk about emerging technologies when we haven't addressed our minds to biotechnology, to nanotechnology, robotics, artificial intelligence, and the likes. This is what I'll break down for you in the next submission, so that we have not only a debate about what the role of the youth is, but also to have a very to have a proper insight into each and everything we are going to discuss. Yeah? I'll come down to climate justice. Okay. You have a question? Okay. Is there any question from the floor? All right. On the issue of climate justice, being a climate activist, I'll give you a thorough report about the inequalities, because you shall have to look at climate justice. I'll give you a historical background, and I'll bring you back, fast forward to one, I'll make a stop to when COVID hit, what happened in the three senses of climate injustice, climate justice, and everything that moves on. And then I'll break down, I'll give you a stem cell and a framework of what we shall be discussing. But particularly, I'll hit on the role of the youth in all the three issues that we're going to discuss. Before I leave this stage, I'd just like to address your minds and tell you that the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs stated that youth are those persons between the ages of 15 and 24 years without prejudice to other definitions by member states. Allow me keep my very wonderful submission, professional debate for the next stage. My name is Aruho Brian, and I'm very honored to be before all of you.
You are so lucky, Aruho, you didn't have any questions or interruptions. I don't know if that means you have done well or not, but we'll find out. We are going to welcome Mr. Mayanja Benson from Makerere University. You have the floor. You have your first 2 minutes uninterrupted, but if after 2 minutes there's no question, you can go ahead and continue and utilize all the 5 minutes.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. My name is Benson C. Mayanja. I am representing Makerere University, Kampala, Uganda, at this semi-final round of the Interface Challenge, Debate Challenge. The topic that is there before us today is digital rights, emerging technology, and climate justice. What is the role of the youth? So, speaking after 4 very eloquent speakers makes it a bit hard for you to shed more light into the topic. So this is basically what I'm going to do. There are a couple of gaps that have been left out when it comes to the epistemological understanding of the different topics that have been given to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to fill in some of those gaps in each of the separate categories of the topics, and then at the very end try to show a synergy among them all. And I think that would be the most unique thing about the scope of this presentation. So let's start with digital rights. So the definition of digital rights by the different panelists has tended to show that in essence they are human rights, and that, but the idea of what a right is has not been interrogated. So it is common with the definition that many people have when they talk about human rights that they fail to define what a right is. And a right is merely a legally protected interest. So it may therefore inform the variation that we have when some states believe that the right to access internet is a human right and other states don't believe in the same. So that's the first and most important aspect that we'll discuss in the scope to understand why states are incentivized to understand access to internet, access to digitalization and digital movement as a human right or even as a right in itself. So the different digital rights that have been, the discussion has not elucidated on any of the digital rights, but some of the digital rights that we have include access to internet, include access to information, include data and privacy rights. So these are what we mean when we talk about digital rights. But the discussion before us has just merely been about digital rights. So your question must have been, what are digital rights? And that is what digital rights are. They include about a 7 thematic approach that requires you to understand some of those aspects. So let's talk about emerging technology. You see, now the understanding of emerging technology has in essence not been dealt with. And the perfect understanding of emerging technology can be looked at from the scholarly article of Daniel Rotolo in 2015, What is Emerging Technology? Now, Danielle Rotolo makes a very interesting argument by categorizing the definition of emerging technology under 5 particular aspects. She argues that the first and most important indicative factor of emerging technologies is that it must be radically novel. It must also be fast-growing. It must be coherent. It must then create significant impact, and that it must be uncertain. So you can't discuss emerging technology without having a particular understanding of what emerging technology is. And those are the 5 definitive aspects that we have. That's why aspects such as nanotechnology, aspects such as artificial intelligence that was coined by John McCarthy in about 1956 are very important for this discussion. Let's talk about climate justice. Now, the understanding of climate justice, in essence, is to look at it from the perspective of an injustice, like it is said. And it is a tripartite aspect of understanding climate justice. Any discussion on climate justice involves climate injustice. So what are the 3 scopes of injustice that we've seen so far, at least as reported by the United Nations? The first and foremost is international injustice when it comes to climate change. International, not in the sense of very many states, but in the sense of the relationship between states and their actions tending towards injustice. Say, for example, the relationship between developing states and undeveloped states. The second is inter- or intra-societal injustice. That's the kind of injustice that comes with the relationship that we have within communities, marginalized communities. And the very last one is intergenerational. What is the injustice that we cause as this generation to the generation that comes after us? Having underscored the scope of discussion that I'll be tending towards, it's important to also address the argument that Edgar makes in relation to ambiguity and etc. You see, the international framework for any human rights is based equally on soft law and binding law. And the most important clarification that we need to make is that the United Nations, for which everyone tends to make submission, runs on a 2-based system, a charter-based system and a treaty-based system. What Edgar submits is largely a charter-based system. But even when it is a charter-based system, the International Court of Justice has clearly stipulated in 2004 in a case concerning the nuclear weapons that equally soft law can be indicative of what law is. Thank you very much. As you can see, the discussion is very long, and I'm very glad to participate. Thank you.
And says the guy who had all 5 minutes uninterrupted. So we are going to invite our last presenter for now, and yes, Mr. Garang Lester, you have the floor.
Okay, good morning. My name is Garang. Garang Quote Lester is my name. I am a 3rd-year student of law at Nkumba University, and I am a debater, and these days debating is more of thinking than just debating. I'm happy to be thinking this morning about interesting things. So, the conversation has happened among the gentleman and lady, and by the time I come in, maybe the only question that has not been asked and probably answered is, why are we having these conversations? Why are we discussing about digital rights? Why are we discussing about emerging technology? Why are we discussing about climate justice? With a basic understanding, as it has come from all the speakers that have come before I have come, I think we have understood what these 3 components are and why and what exactly is the status quo or what relates with them. So the fundamental thing is, why are we having this conversation this morning in a 3rd world country, Uganda, with a government that has been in place for over 30 years, with a population that is progressively growing, with unemployment rates increasing, with the economy deteriorating, with populations also increasing. Like I said, I have said that twice for a reason. So the thing we need to understand is, with an increase in population, with a deterioration in democracy, with a retarding education or sort of literacy levels, or by the time we define education right now, it's not even about literacy. It's about how you use your literacy to benefit yourself. Then the fundamental question, therefore, is, it is a very important thing that countries like Uganda in the 3rd world and the global south start to have this conversation. Now, Edgar spoke about digital rights, and he underscored a very critical aspect of digital rights, and that is access to digital rights. And there's been a conversation about why access is hard and what would be done. Ladies and gentlemen, the conversation we need to have is, you cannot talk about access to digital spaces without access to information about them, or without any critical information about the same. And that is where digital literacy comes in as an important aspect. So what is digital literacy? The amount of information you know about the digital spaces and how to use them is critical. People are now flooding the internet to sell their products, and then they are becoming victims of fraud and other things because they don't have enough information about them. We have computer studies as things we study in school. From senior one, we study computer, but what computer? Typing, WordPress, and all these. But is that where digital rights are, ladies and gentlemen? Digital information or access to literacy, to digital literacy, has moved beyond just knowing how to type and knowing how to do a few things, to knowing how to code and how to actually enter information into a computer language and then use that to solve the problems that we have. I'll first leave that at that. Then second, then how do we improve this? We need policy interventions and not just conversational interventions. What are policy interventions? There must be an education policy that then propels digital literacy for people to then know how to use internet to benefit themselves. Climate justice, in the submission of Benson, he spoke about something about international injustice to climate, and this is the important thing that we need to come is, people have already agreed that there is a problem with carbon emission. But who are the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide into the environment? So what I want to speak about this is the idea of just energy transition. It makes no sense if you want to force countries like the global southern countries that do not even emit a lot to then cut on their emission, which in the very first place they do not have when they are not at that level. Uganda, as we speak, is about to start exploiting its oil. It is disingenuous for a country in the global north that have used their energies to improve their economies to tell country like Uganda in the global south to stop exploiting their oil because it emits carbon. So the idea of just energy transition has to be underscored, that as you make that argument, you need to understand that by the time you're exploiting your oil to benefit your economies, countries in the global south had their oil underground and they deserve the same justice. So at that level, what do we do then to make these countries exploit their resources like oil without endangering the environment? We need to sit on the table and first agree that the emission is actually only done by the global north, but the global south cannot also stop from doing that. So what can the global south do to contribute to climate change mitigation, and the global north do to contribute climate change in mitigation? Whatever we do should not be able to endanger these people. Because ladies, listen, and gentlemen, if you told a country like Uganda not to improve their economy by exploiting their oil, or any other global southern country, what you're going to create is an economic retardation which then harms the environment at the very first place, because the poorest people are the ones that use charcoal, the poorest people are the ones that cut trees, the poorest people are the ones that litter around. So we need to that understanding is fundamental. Thank you.
That wasn't a clap. I'm looking for someone who is not clapping. There is a gentleman behind there who is not clapping. You're going to ask the first question when we start audience interaction. So better prepare your question. So thank you so much, our dear panelists. Let us give another round of applause to our panelists. How many people believe that our panelists did justice to this topic? How many people believe they did justice to the topic? Please put your hands straight. Be confident. Be confident. Okay, I'm seeing someone who didn't raise their hand up. Would you have argued it differently? How many people believe our panelists did justice to the topic? Okay, I can see Douglas here. Would you have argued it differently? Is there someone who could have argued it differently? Different from our audience? Our debaters, be confident. Okay, how many people agree with the panelists? The rest, where do you belong? Okay, we are going to have a question session. There are panelists who escaped questions. You're not going to escape me. So we are going to have a round of questions. Our panelists are each going to answer up to 5 questions from me at different times, and you have 2 minutes to respond to the questions. Our audience, please prepare your questions. Your session will come after mine. You see, me, I take priority because I was listening. My first question goes to Miss Jenna, who was our first panelist for today. Miss Keiyuba Jenna from Islamic University in Uganda. Let's first clap for her. So, Miss Jenna, what do you know about the fourth industrial revolution?
Well, the fourth industrial revolution, it is a period where we are having new forms of industries that question is in relation to the emerging technologies, because with the industrial revolution, we expect to employ a different type of technology. So when we talk about industrial revolution, we relate that to the emerging technologies. So industrial revolution, what my perspective, what I can say about such a question is that industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution is coming up because of the emerging technologies, where different technologies are employed in different sectors or fields of life to improve on the existing technologies and existing instruments currently, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jenna. So Ms. Agatha is timing the 2 minutes, so you pay attention. Let me move to Mr. Garang. You look eager to answer that question. So Mr. Garang, what do you know about the fourth industrial revolution?
Okay. Oh, cool. So I know a lot about it, but I will begin with the most relevant. The most relevant about the fourth industrial revolution is the fact that there is a speedy move by states and individuals towards the use of technology as a means or a primary means of solving their problems. Now, these are manifested in the harnessing of artificial intelligence, the use of machine learning, and the use of less climate or climate detrimental of fuel sources to fuel the things that we need for. So with then comes the need to understand that the fourth industrial revolution demands that the skills that we acquire conform to the fourth industrial revolution. That's one. Secondly, it demands that the policies that we want in place also conform to the fourth industrial revolution. Now, what that means is, for a country that is transitioning towards the use of technology as a solution metric for problems that they face, then the policies should therefore be able to facilitate the use of the same technology. And I always like using examples of terrible things. So you can't be a country that is transitioning to the use of technology and internet-based marketing, for example, and then you're the same country that taxes internet very highly, and you're the same country that limits internet at political seasons. That in itself contradicts the whole idea. Then secondly, also, the policies or the kind of skilling you give to your people to be able to exist within the context of the fourth industrial revolution must be something that conforms to the same. So the system of instruction, the system of skilling your people must be the one that also prepares people that can actually participate in the marketplace of the fourth industrial revolution. Then lastly also, the economic policy must be a one that also appreciates the same. An economic policy that does not seem to promote industrialization does not fit in the fourth industrial revolution. That is fundamental. Thank you.
Okay. By the dear audience, we are assuming you all know about the fourth industrial revolution. How many people know about it? You're part of the judges. You can't be part of the judges when you don't know the answers to the questions. So how many people know about the fourth industrial revolution? I'm afraid that our panelists are not putting up their hands. Okay, so I'm moving to another panelist to answer the same question, and that is Mr. Benson Mayanja from Makerere University. Makerere University, oye? Where are students of Makerere University? Yes, Benson, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. So the one thing that I think would be important for us to understand about the fourth industrial revolution is really the growth of artificial intelligence. The discussion on improved technology and policy reformation is entirely benched on how well we can have artificial intelligence working. Now, Garang Lester rightly notes the idea of machine learning. But machine learning is essentially predicated on the existence of big data and the ability to use deep learning. So policy reformation and ETC can only survive in a world where we have big data. So the question now is, do we access big data in a country such as Uganda? That stems down to the ideas of access to information, the ability of digital rights, and the idea of usage of emerging technology. Now, whereas I recognize the argument that was made by Lester earlier on concerning digital literacy, you recognize that there's a difference. There's a very huge distinction between learning about the internet and learning about the rights that concern the internet. So merely having a conversation such as this may proliferate my right to freedom of expression, but if I don't know about the freedom of expression, it does not necessarily mean that I am enjoying my right, because I don't know about it. So that's the one thing that is important when it comes to understanding the fourth industrial revolution. Very many people don't know about it, even when they are transitioning into it. So the knowledge part of the fourth industrial revolution is important. But then even secondly, and the most other important thing, is the usage of the technologies that we develop to proliferate other spheres of development. Uganda's priority, in as far as its budget is concerned, is particularly health. So can we develop nanotech? Can we have stem cell? Can we invest in these areas to enable the fourth generation have a ripple effect on the economy? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Benson. Let's move to Mr. Edgar to answer the same question.
Okay, thank you so much. So for context, I think when you talk about the fourth industrial revolution, and I think this was already answered in my submission, because we get the whole idea of, for instance, the digital literacy versus your knowledge on the internet rights, as how Benson argues. But I think all those comparisons would definitely fade in comparison to what I already submitted earlier. When I tell you the whole point here should be the access. Because the best way, first of all, to understand your rights is when you participate in that digital economy or that digital environment whatsoever. I don't think the best way is to post them on Google, that these are the rights, or put them on billboards. The best way people best realize, and be able to advocate is when they are taking part of it. So the whole point will come back to the access. But then lastly, again, in relation to what industrial revolution means, and this is why I left those two topics at first, because they are a little extensive. Now, for instance, when we speak about the idea of emerging technologies, we have emerging technologies that are coming, like the instance of wiretapping. So people need to, one, understand that wiretapping, but also we need to have some sort of regulation that dictates the circumstance through which you can use it. For instance, can you be able to wiretap a conversation between a criminal suspect and his lawyer? Can you be able to, to wiretap a conversation between, a doctor and a patient? Such kind of emerging technologies are coming up, and then we need to interrogate the extent to which they're in line with the already fundamental rights that we know of. Because we know some rights which are absolute, like the freedom of thought, and that we have an emerging technology of using neurochips. Neurochips, they're able to study your thoughts. Now, that technology is against a fundamental human right, one that is absolute, of the freedom of thought. So now that's why these emerging technologies, we ought to look at them from that context and be able to examine them. Now, lastly, on climate justice. Climate justice is very easy. The idea of climate justice is always on the clash of development versus environment. What should come first? The question is a little tricky because it's more of a situation of an egg and a hen, what came first. So I don't think the solution is like Lester suggests that we need to look at it from the global south and the global north. That can't be the solution. The whole solution is that regardless of all economic aspects and development plans we have, we need to weigh them against the environmental impact assessment plan. What is the impact on the environment? And then you can vote.
Edgar, your time is up.
Thank you.
Okay. How were you able to guess my next panelist to answer the question? Okay. Since Edgar already decided, Mr. Baluku, what do you understand by the fourth industrial revolution?
Thank you so much. I want us to agree on one thing, that we share the same skies. Industrial revolution, in this sense, calls for global cooperation. The research I have is that Africa alone generates about 4%, less than 4% of the world's carbon footprint. However, it suffers very little blame for climate change. It bears that very little blame. However, it suffers now the effects of damages, for example, through floods, droughts, and plagues that come along. So industrial revolution, basically, I understand it in a way that it brings about the emerging technologies without setting perimeters, or without being decisive and divisive. The industrial revolution moves on with, it is cross-generation, it is cross-generational, with evidence of the emerging technologies, and through the global treaties that are coming up, the regional integration that is coming up, whereby East Africa, for example, can have the same sense of policy making. United Nations, nations under United Nations, can also come together and decide on the way forward in as far as the world, in this fast-growing world's economy. Thank you so much.
Okay. Please pass the microphone to Mr. Brian Aruho, who will be responding to the same question.
Good morning once again. Well, I wouldn't want so much to differ from what the previous speakers have said, my fellow panelists. However, the thing is that when we are looking at industrial revolution, we also need to address our minds to very key things. One, the impact of the emerging technologies on we the people. As the previous panelist said, he wanted us to have the same understanding with him that we share the same sky. I wouldn't want to differ from him. We share the same sky, but we have very different governments. We have very different implementive policies. And well, the demographic sphere too is very different. However, we need to address our minds to the impact of this industrial revolution. Is it positive? Is it negative? I'm not an European, so let me come to Africa. In a country like Uganda, we should really be looking at emerging technologies. We should be that sort of country, or even Africa at large. As I earlier on stated, I'm a Pan-Africanist, so I wouldn't want to go to the other sphere. But in Africa, we should look at how we can harness the potential within the emerging technologies. One, that starts with empowering our very own youth first, because we are not going to, you can't come up, you wake up and then say, well, emerging technologies are there, let's look at biotechnology, let's look at information technology, let's look at nanotechnologies, just like Mr. Benson had earlier on stated. Let's look at artificial intelligence, just like what Mr. Garang stated. Let's look at... Okay.
Your time is up. And proceed. You have 1 minute.
Okay. Okay, so we need to look at how the governments can harness the potential within the youth, first to teach us what the emerging technologies are, but then also on how we can capitalize the powers within ourselves, our governing bodies and authorities, law-making bodies, to have a better future for Africa in general. I beg to submit.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let's clap for our panelists. So we are going to our next question. And since you answered that question last, maintain the microphone for the next question. We have been hearing our panelists talk about artificial intelligence. So, Mr. Brian Aruho, to what extent is artificial intelligence applicable in our day-to-day lives?
Okay, thank you so much. Artificial intelligence in the year 2022 is very much applicable. Artificial intelligence is a very diverse thing. Very different people have very different insights into artificial intelligence, its uses, its varieties, and well, how it can shape us. However, artificial intelligence can actually start from the smartphone we have. Artificial intelligence can also move to the machinery we have here. Artificial intelligence can also cut across to the very many computerized gadgets that we have. I don't know what gadgets people have, but the panelists that are seated here, at least I know that Mr. Mayanja and the gentleman here are richer than me, so they do have gadgets I can't afford. But to what extent is it applicable? It's very applicable to the sense that we have to use, and we do use artificial intelligence in our day-to-day running. That is a fact that we can't hide away from. That is a fact that our governments can't hide away from. That is a fact that the world at large can't hide away from. If the question is, if artificial intelligence wasn't there, well, where would the earth be? Well, for purposes of maybe digital marketing and everything, where would we be? Would be very far behind. And this is the very key thing that we need to be pushing to our ministries of information in Uganda, well, to start with, to know that this is something very key. So when you're talking artificial intelligence, it's day-to-day running, it's implementive policies. We also need to address our minds and get to know that this is something we can't run away from, starting from your gadgets and up to everything you use in your daily runnings. Thank you so much.
Okay, please pass the microphone to Mr. Sam Baluku to answer the same question. You're going to answer the same question, and the question is that, to what extent is artificial intelligence applicable to our day-to-day life?
Okay, thank you so much. Artificial intelligence basically deals with the use of there's a collaboration between artificial intelligence and machine learning, or the use of machines. Now, it is important that it isn't our work, our day-to-day work. For example, you find these days, for the students who are here, you're doing courseworks, you will easily go to internet, you have access to different sites that will ease your intellectual capacity in as far as thinking is concerned. And then artificial intelligence also has lessened the load, the biggest load of employers, for example, in today's world. Instead of hiring secretaries, today people are using their laptops. People are using emails and to distribute work and reports. The other thing also, artificial intelligence is also helping to reduce on environmental degradation in as far as our day-to-day activities are concerned. Because previously people would burn paper, would do this and that, but it's also reducing on environmental degradation. Finally, artificial intelligence also has given people employment opportunities. We're seeing these civic space guys, they're here. It's all about artificial intelligence that is has brought them here. So it is actually has created economic growth and employment opportunities. Thank you so much.
So, Mr. Edgar, I saw you applying sign language to your thoughts. Please answer the same question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think this question is quite personal, because currently personally, I think I'm doing my final year project, and it's on the application of artificial intelligence in petroleum engineering, in drilling engineering. So how applicable it is really applicable. Because the whole point, for instance, the idea I'm developing is on how you can be able to study things that would take about 4 months when doing that analysis. And I'm creating a software that could analyze that within just 5 seconds. So, so they make work really easier. I think that would be very important. But also, we need to be very careful with artificial intelligence. Again, that's why we need some sort of great regulation. Because artificial intelligence is our last creation, but at the same time can be our demise. This is very important because the peripheral thinking skills of artificial intelligence cannot be compared with our linear thinking skills as humans. While that means some scholars think we could be at the threat of extinction, that means we ought to look at it carefully, because in 2040, it is projected that artificial intelligence will have reached a stage called technological singularity, where machines will be able to reproduce without need or aid of any human being. A machine can create another fellow machine. That means they won't need humans. So I don't think whether in that world we shall be any useful, because currently we keep machines because we need them. I don't think we shall be of any need to them in such a world. So we need to tackle it carefully, though we need it, so we have to find that balance. Very important.
Okay, thank you, Edgar. Please pass the microphone to Mr. Benson Mayanja to answer the same question.
Okay, it's quite interesting to speak after someone who is doing a final year project on AI. But I think the most and the fundamental aspect to understand about the applicability of artificial intelligence is to first understand the categorization that we have in artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is largely categorized into narrow AI and general AI, strong and weak AI. So the applicability that Brian tells you about is basically weak AI, the AI that helps you do singular activities such as play chess, that beat Kasparov, you know. There's different types of AI, and AI under machine learning is enabled under supervised learning, unsupervised learning, you have reinforced learning. So there's this particular aspect of AI when you ask that question that we must address ourselves to even before we can answer it. So I'm going to answer it twofold. The first, in regard to the weak AI, is very applicable, and we've been given various answers to that. And I think in relation to the topic that we are speaking about today, the applicability of AI has been seen in policy formulation, for example, in Uganda, whereby policies and legislation is being formed, such as the Misuse Act of 2011, Data and Privacy Act of 2011. So there's an applicability even at government level to ensure that AI influences policy formulation. But equally so on a human rights-based approach to implementing certain human rights aspects. So the existence of nanotech, chemotherapy, gene stem, and stem cell therapy all happen to be within that domain. But most importantly, and picking up from Edgar's submission on the point of singularity, I think then what we need to do is that the applicability of AI in regard to policy formulation should not be to regulate AI, because that's nearly impossible. What we need to do is regulate the usage of AI, such as regulating the kind of work that Edgar wants to do with AI in regard to petroleum engineering, as opposed to regulating AI in itself. So how we survive the point of singularity is really by regulating the uses and what we do with AI. Thank you. I think my time is up.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Benson. Please pass the microphone to Mr. Garang. You and Edgar will fight that battle after this debate. So, Mr. Garang, please answer the same question.
Okay. Thank you. I must confess that it feels nice to speak after Benson and Edgar. They have simplified my work, so I'm just going to do what I usually do. And what I usually do is to link the abstract conversation in the intellectual domain to the status quo, so that that guy down there in Nkoma's Simbi, for example, can understand what we are talking about. So I am going to break it down to about 4 things. One of the things is AI. The question is to what extent, and to all extents, AI is applicable. That is what these gentlemen have said, and that is what I'm going to just tell you how that becomes a possibility. So to all extents, the application of AI is a necessity. So now, being necessary, then how then do we apply it so that we can then rest and say, okay, it is applicable? So where we apply it is the most pressing challenges that we face. And I think from the internet revolution and the rise of artificial intelligence and the use of technology, we have been able to solve a lot of problems. And as a developing country, for example, which is what I just said that I do a lot, is then how is it very applicable? Now, first thing, what are the biggest problems that we are facing as we speak as a country right now? One of the biggest of them is health. There is a very fundamental problem with how we access health and how we use, or how we then use information to inform our health living styles. So in the application of AI, people then can make decisions about their health because of the information provided, because of the access or the applicability of artificial intelligence. For example, the other day I was speaking with my female friends, and apparently they can be able to track their monthly happenings using a mobile app, and that is how applicable artificial intelligence is, for example. Then another example is if you go to Facebook right now and like just a picture or a post about a shoe, in the next 30 minutes you might like 1,000 of shoes because of how AI has interpreted your like of a shoe to mean you are interested in shoes, and then advertisers then give you all this number of shoes. So that is how applicable AI then is. And again, like I said, in all extents, it is very applicable. Thank you.
Thank you. Please pass the microphone to Ms. Jenna to answer the same question. to what extent is artificial intelligence applicable to our day-to-day living?
Right now, I'm just glad I was the last to speak on such a topic, because I was, I was always the first, you know. So, to what extent is AI applicable? AI is applicable currently to a larger extent in our day-to-day life. You know, when you talk about AI, it's ability to use this technology, you know, you have phones, even the small phones like the button phones, it's also AI, because, I mean, it doesn't think like we do, it doesn't do the work we do. So we look at laptops, we look at these smartphones, we look at even how, for example, these banners, those words have to be printed somewhere, you know, and then get attached. They're using AI, because trust me, you as an individual, even if you write very well, you will not print the same thing. It will be calligraphy, but it will not be the same letters a computer can produce. So AI is applicable to a larger extent in our day-to-day life. For example, it's applicable in aspects, like I addressed earlier, I said emerging technologies exist with new formations and also improvement or evolving new modes of the already existing technology. So when I talk about AI, I mean there are things like X-rays. It has been there, but things are getting improved. Currently in the US, there is what they call the Bay. The Bay can scan your body and see if there is a possibility where your body will one time get broken, you know, possible injuries that you would get, you know. So we have a lot of new things that are happening, even with the existing technology. We have it in the education sector. I mean, trust me, most of us here are not doing anything near climate or AI or emerging technologies, but we get this information that we're talking about from the internet, you know. Look at, this is education, we look at the health, we look at the tourism sector. For us to make sure, like the lady from America came, you know, she had to come because maybe she saw somewhere that Ugandan universities are cool, so, you know. Yeah, so the advertisement, then that is in the tourism sector. We have like AI is really applied almost everywhere, so it is applied to the largest extent currently.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Jenna. We are having another round of questions. And this time I'm starting with Benson from Makerere University. So please pass the microphone to Benson. So Benson, what role should the youth, I'm assuming you're a youth, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
So what role should the youth play to leverage from the benefits of the fourth industrial revolution?
Okay, I would like to first start by saying, by all definitions, United Nations, African Union, etc., I am a youth. But then also, more importantly, I think there is about three things. It's a very broad aspect, so I'm going to just focus on the most important ones. I think the first and most important thing that youth need to do is to secure, they need to secure digital activism. It is important to note that the global demographics stipulate that the future is youth. So how then do we ensure that things such as digital literacy, things such as digital rights, things such as perfect use of emerging technology is achieved, is to ensure digital activism. Now, there has been an argument that digital activism can indeed spur offline activism. What that means is that there is a ripple effect when it comes to digital activism to ensure social change. A good example is the Black Lives Matter movement, which was started on Twitter and then calculated into social change. Similar instances in Bosnia and Herzegovina, whereby we had youth challenging climate malpractice by the state. Most of what digital activism does is basically propel us into the fourth industrial revolution to ensure that we can leverage the benefits that come therefrom, and also things such as policy formulation. The second and most important thing is to ensure that we have youths that can create a youth-led civic space. Civic space has been defined by the United Nations Advisory Committee on Human Rights, and it has stipulated that civic space is merely ensuring that we have engagement from the youth to ensure policy formulation. What that means is that you can have things such as climate litigation, you can have litigation that holds states accountable to the treaties that they are bound by domestic law, and all these are things that fall within a specific fabric that would ensure that youths are able to leverage their potential now to benefit from emerging technologies.
Okay, please pass the microphone to Edgar. So Edgar, what role should the youth play to leverage from the benefits of the fourth industrial revolution?
Okay, so now I think really we can't just have youth as people who only do digital activism. That would be useless. I think first of all, we need to have youth, one, understand that they need to demand, one, for the right to access to internet. That is basic. And this is why this argument is very important. Maybe if you don't understand why I'm insisting on this argument, it is for a simple reason, is that without access to internet in that fourth revolution, then other rights are at stake. For instance, your right to work, your right to education, because everything is running now on internet. You can be able to apply for a job to UN, everything will be digital forms, everywhere they're on the internet. Some of you are attending lectures on Zoom. What that means then is that in future, without that access to start with, then other rights are at stake, not just your digital rights, but even other fundamental rights. That's why it's very important that the youth demand for that access. Now, beyond that, how can they position themselves? Number two, they need also be part of the people who bring those digital innovations. They need to continuously do those innovations. We've had some, though you can maybe question the quality, but we've had different apps even from Makerere University. There's some app, is it called Sure App? Something like that. But it's an interesting app. But also, the whole point here, at the whole point here is that you see, the problem with that revolution is simple, is that you see, things to do with internet and phones, you either take from them or they take from you. So if you cannot use, for instance, your phone to create money or something, most likely it will be draining you in terms of data, in terms of charging, in terms of etc. So what the youth, they need to do there is position themselves in that digital economy, for instance. They need to start exploiting things like cryptocurrency. I mean, that's where we're going. And perhaps if we try to make it to the finals, we shall discuss for you the digital economy very well. But so that should be a position of the youth to be proactive within those dynamics that are in the future, and not necessarily just maybe just doing activism and speaking about it. That cannot do so much in their benefit advantage. Very important to be proactive in that space.
Okay, Mr. Sam, you're actually next. Edgar always predicts the person who is
I don't know
next.
why. That's witchcraft, I think. Witchcraft at work. I'm most obliged. I think I'm disagreeing with Edgar when he says if we are to engage the youth, then it's somehow useless. Edgar, Uganda, for example, if I set my perimeters to Uganda, it has the youngest population in Africa. And given the status quo, 80% of Uganda's population are young people. So what does it mean? We are the generation we've been waiting for. So it simply means we are stakeholders in this because we are the majority. Thank you so much. So I believe the young people can organize and promote ICT-related challenges and competitions, for example, and perhaps bring their ideas together. I also believe that the young people can develop and create digital solutions for the existing national and global challenges so as to fulfill the agenda, the 2030 agenda for sustainable development of the UN 2030 agenda for sustainable development. I believe as young people, we have different abilities to deliver. We are talented differently. And one great philosopher said that it's in the midst of our decisions that our destiny is shaped. So I would encourage the youth to come up with a coalition, for example, of talented youth who are active in digital space so as to contribute largely to our country's economy. Then lastly, I believe the youth can come up with what I would call the youth labs. These youth labs, it is something that I've also started in the district where I come from, that is Kasese, whereby we find mentors and support networks so as to develop new digital skills. Because if you someone, Edgar is doing engineering and the other one is doing, maybe specified in, oh, thank you so much, otherwise I was powering matter.
I can see Edgar is burning to respond to your powering matter, but Edgar will have you at a later stage. Please pass the microphone to Brian. Brian, you are not next, but you were burning to respond. So you're next now to respond to that question.
Well, for clarity, I don't want the House to think otherwise. I had the burning question to him, but well, terms and conditions do apply. Well, to start with, my brother said Uganda has the youngest population in Africa. If my research serves me right, I wouldn't want to disagree with him, but if my research serves me right, I remember the African Union saying that Niger had the youngest population in Africa, if my research serves me right. Well, the role of the youth. First and foremost, we should know that artificial intelligence is here, not for a certain period of time, but for eternity. Secondly, we need to know that all these transformations, emerging technologies, as we earlier on stated, nanotechnology, biotechnology, robotics, artificial intelligence, educational technology, are not here for a time frame. They're here for eternity. Yeah? And we need to also get very fast to the fact that we need to address our minds that we're not going to be youth for only today. Yeah? That has a time limit. We shall not be youth after 30 years. Mr. Benson may reach there before me, but will not be youth after 30 years. So what we do within this time gap is very key for us to create a cross-generational cause or belief for the other people that are going to come in the space that we are going to live. So how we do use the artificial intelligence currently, or the emerging technologies, is still in light of paving way for the younger generation that is going to come. If we do use artificial intelligence in a negative way, we are going to set a precedent that, well, you know, it's just like how most African parents, mine very inclusive, are champions of saying, you guys are lazy. We used to walk kilometers to school. Yeah? So even when you're at Makerere or Cavendish and you rent in, around Chikoni, you'll walk so that you also want to leave a tale for your children. So right now, when we use the technology only for, you know, chatting and everything, then we are setting a bad precedent. Let's use the technology, one, to brand ourselves, our businesses, but also to know that these technologies should help us set a good precedent in terms of business, in terms, oh, okay. If I make it to the finals, I'll give you a detailed.
I can see all our panelists are seeking to bribe our judges. They are unbribable. So let's proceed to the next, and that is Miss Jenna. Please respond to the same question. What role should the youth play to leverage from the benefits of fourth industrial revolution?
Well, thank you. As earlier discussed, what the fourth industrial revolution is, we are not looking at only technology in the fourth industrial revolution. It is applicable in all aspects, but I would like to disseminate it and make it a little larger on grounds of agriculture, health, relationships, culture, education, and work. So when we talk about the role of the youths, the first thing the youths have to do is positioning themselves. Like you position yourself in a place where you feel you can make change. For example, if you feel it is the parliament that is making laws, I mean, go and run for it. Can't you become a parliamentarian? You know, when you feel you don't have enough knowledge about such a topic, why don't you position yourself and learn? Let us, youths ought to learn, like get the literacy that we want. Because if you're dealing with industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, we are going to more to engage with technology in the different aspects of life. So if you are a youth and you do not know how to use, personally, I just learned how to use Google Meet recently. So I mean, I would stay there and be like, Google Meet exists, yet I only knew Zoom. So as a youth, you ought to learn where you feel you want to participate or get something from it. And then we look at women's participation. You know, women are really, really pulling themselves back, yet they are also youths. I mean, there is this kind of, I don't know if youths mean only gentlemen, but I believe, like recently, Makerere had the women in climate, you know? It was some big move that women did. And we know, you call even the men, so the men come under the umbrella of women. But currently we have youths I mean, men, gentlemen taking on the role of youths as if women do not exist. So I would pray that the women also engage in the activities that can cause change. Then the other thing is engagement in like positioning, I said. So there is also engagement in aspects that can change. For example, if you find something disposed somewhere, thank you.
Okay, please pass the microphone to Mr. Garang to do what he does best.
Okay, thank you very much. I must confess that I will do what I do best. So, I'm going to begin with what the role of the youth should not be. Then I will conclude with what it should be. I think in the fourth industrial revolution, we are being unfair to ourselves if the only thing we do on the internet is to post memes, to drag other people on Twitter, or to post statuses, or to dance on TikTok. I'm not saying don't do it. But if it is the only thing that you do, that should not be our role in the fourth industrial revolution. So what then should be? The following should be twofold. One, we need to first equip ourselves with the digital skills necessary to exist in the fourth industrial context. The digital skills necessary because you can be a participant as a passive participant when you don't have the skills. You only receive information, but you can't participate. So, in three ways. One, you need to prepare by skilling yourself. Instead of posting memes, wherever you're watching from, instead of posting memes on WhatsApp or whatever it is, you would use that data to maybe learn how to code, for example, on free softwares like the Code Camp online, so that you can learn how to communicate with the computers. That is a better thing that you can do. Then second, you need to participate. Participation is what I've just said. If you learned how to code, if you knew about cryptocurrencies, then tomorrow you will be the part of the people that will trade in the same. So you need to participate. Then the last one, you need to make it progressive. So the fourth industrial revolution did not come to stop or did not come to end the world. It came to make the world a progressive place to exist. So you must participate in making the same idea a progressive idea. The second fault is then where the gentleman then came in. You need to guard that the fourth industrial revolution actually serves the best interest for why it came to exist. So how do you guard against any other thing that might harm the same? Two things. Benson talked about activism. If you think there is unfairness in access to the same, then speak out for the people that cannot speak and they need to access. Then the second thing you need to do is you need to engage in harm mitigation metrics. Edgar talked about tech singularity. If we have been lucky to be aware that in 2040 there's going to be tech singularity, what do you do as a youth is to actually engage in inventing metrics that will actually mitigate the same said tech singularity so that the progress that I speak about can actually be attainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garang. So now time to involve our audience. Please, panelists, pass the microphone. So our audience, it's now time to engage you, and I would like to welcome my co-moderator back. Please.
We are racing against time, and I am going to cut short the audience interaction. So I'm going to keep, first it will be each university one question or one contribution, yeah? So you're going to discuss amongst yourselves who will, given that question or comment or what you want, and it will be under 1 minute. I feel embarrassed to give you 30 seconds, but under 1 minute. So 1 minute is the maximum. Yes, so we are going to start with them, and then we'll have 30 seconds for each of you to wrap up. So if in the audience someone has a question that is directed specifically to one of you, they should specify that. So we are going to start now. You can start with the gentleman in front of you.
Make sure you
the
raise
university
your
in front of you, because each person represents a university.
Yes, well, by the names of Natwa Ronald, representing Uganda Martyrs University Nkozi. My first question goes to Brian, our panelist.
You have one question.
Yeah, one question.
Yes.
Yeah, earlier you referred to digital rights as presumed rights, and I don't get that context of presumed rights, because in Uganda and on the international level, we don't have presumed rights. So could you please elaborate more on these presumed rights?
Okay.
Can I have the ladies participate more from the audience, please? We are really not represented very well.
My question goes to Edgar. He talked about the policies and... Okay, I'm Joanna Rishava from Kabale University. So my question goes to Edgar. You talked about the policies and how they're going to be implemented. So I would like to know those policies that we could implement so that we can ensure the role of the youth in the digital rights.
Okay.
Panelists, take note of all the comments and questions that come your way.
Well, I'm Jude Thaddeus Kule from Uganda Pentecostal University. My question goes to Edgar. Edgar, I'd like you to distinct between rights and access, because I expect you must first have the right, then you access. In Uganda, by law, no access without a right. So, and you said we need to first access, then we follow up the rights. I think you need to address your mind about that before your next submission will be airing.
Just a reminder, there are 6 panelists.
Thank you very much. Ngabirano Titus, Busitema University. My question generally would go to all of us who talked about AI in general. We get to realize that Garang talked about the AI bit as regulating AI, us not regulating AI. I think that, as Edgar stated, we should regulate the AI. And 2, when you talked about the role of the youth, all of us panelists forgot the part whereby we, the youth, are not part of the implementation process when you're drafting laws that govern most of these things. Therefore, I feel the best part in this scenario would have been considering the implementers of a law moving forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, do we have questions? Yeah? So Uganda Christian University are enjoying the show.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Miriam Lawoko from Cavendish University. And my question goes to both Benson and Lester. You spoke about activism. Now, we have to talk about activism, the reality of Uganda. Activism is potentially a good thing, but we have to understand that when you're going to be an activist for something, you have to do it in a place where you have freedom to do it. Now, if you're going to be advising the youth to be activists, we've well seen the ramifications of activism in Uganda. So when you talk about being activists for digital rights and the youth playing a role in that, I would like you to shed light on the reality of that. And if we actually do have the freedom to be activists in the country that we live in for causes such as digital rights.
Panelists, do you need help from me to relay that?
All the panelists here can ably hear that accent and listen. Yeah, so.
Good morning. My name is Ricky Mugume Kashija from Mbara University of Science and Technology. So our question, before we get the question, I think I'd like to point out the idea that AI goes beyond the day-to-day activities these people have mentioned. I think it's important that in an environment where health is degrading very much, AI has played a very big role, and even within our universities, because we believe as Mbara University we've invented a machine that can actually detect strokes before one has it, and strokes is one of the leading causes of death in this country. We have smart watches. I don't know if anyone is putting on one here. That is also a very good improvement of AI. So health is key as we have this discussion. Going down to our question is going to be on the idea of access. I think we stand for access as a way of actually developing from the emerging technologies going down to climate justice. So the question is, in the fourth industrial revolution, respectful of social placing. For example, I think it was Mr. Benson, Mayanja, who mentioned the idea that the different countries, the third world, developing and the developed nations, is it pertinent for any country? Because we need to know, are countries that in the first world, are they the only ones who will have access to the fourth industrial revolution, or everyone is going to fall along with or without? Thank you.
My name is Pritapista Masava. I'm from Makerere University. So this question is directed to Edgar. How can digital rights be promoted in the era of emerging technologies, whereby emerging technologies are invasive in nature, they have surveillance and violate privacy? My second question goes to... All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. My name is Harold Sewanondam from Nkumba University. So my question goes to Garang Court Leicester. All right, so Minister Ruth Acheng this year said that for 25 years, Uganda has been working on woman emancipation. That is from since the Constitution came into place in 1995. So, and I actually know the same thing is going to happen even when my son is 25, that we shall still fight for women's rights. This is not irrelevant. Why? Even if we were to succeed in digital rights and everything that has been discussed today, there's a prospect of merit versus gender. It has become a common thing that wherever we go, we say, now like what has happened here, we don't have an equal representation of women, whereas that may not be bad, but the question is of merit. Should we give authority to digital rights, or youth to have digital rights, or people to innovate on a basis of gender, or rather on a basis on who is capable of doing so? That is a question I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to you, Agatha.
Oh, so we are done with the questions? There's another question. There's a university you haven't.
Oh, you haven't asked.
My name is Mbararara from Makerere University Business School. My question goes to the only lady on the panel. She brought the aspect of the role of women in digitalization. And I think maybe she didn't have more light on it, but don't you think that female participation or progress in the digital space has actually rapidly grown? Because according to statistics, women's participation in the digital space they've actually broken the glass ceiling. So I'd like her to elaborate more on the role of women. If she believes that they haven't participated, then let her give us more insight on it, because according to what I know, women are actually thriving. They are breaking the glass ceiling when it comes to digitalization.
Okay, thank you very much. We could, first commend what people have done and then add the information. And yes, I am going to give you 30 minutes each. I don't care how many questions have been directed to you. I mean 30 seconds, I am sorry. Those who have, 30 seconds, we don't have time. So because everyone here will have to have those 30 seconds. Some of you who have many questions, no, you can answer one or two of them. Yes, 30 seconds for each one of you. The lady, your question was the last one, so you can start. Both. Guys, we are going to leave here at 7. But if the host says so and everyone else, let's do that.
Yeah, I will begin with the last in relation to the second last, because the second last talked about merit versus gender, and then the other one talked about women, the rapid growth of women participation in the digitalization. Ladies and gentlemen, they have really come up, like women are there. But I would like to bring to our notice that women emancipation doesn't mean that you give them space where men cannot go. Women emancipation sometimes calls for you as a woman to stand up. Like I said that women ought to participate. I didn't say that they should give a platform to only women to participate, but women should stand up. So when I talk about emancipation, I talk about standing up as a woman, talking to a direct woman. That is what I meant by women in participation. And then someone asked, is the fourth industrial revolution limited to countries? A revolution takes a process. It does not happen one day and we say that we have finally revolutionized. So revolution, we might even be already, we are already in the revolution. So it doesn't happen one time and it is not limited to a country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There was a general question about the young people that they are not lawmakers. I'd like to address your mind that we have lawmakers who are in the scope of the youth. We have Honorable Franca, we have Honorable Nyeko, they were in parliament. These are lawmakers and still they can influence and come up with our recommendations as young people. And then about merit versus gender, I personally believe in meritocracy, that it's not who you are, it's not whether you're male or female, but I believe in what you can do best. Thank you so much.
5 questions.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. I'm going to actually attempt to answer all of them. I'm going to start with the second one, which was on the issue of rights versus access. Let me arrest your fears. It is not the constitution that addresses the need. Sometimes the need that addresses the constitution. So, but number one, first of all, those dictator rights are there for you. You have access to them. They're not like we are debating something from heaven. So you can demand for the access. But even if there was that such of a circumstance in the constitution, the fact that I've proven to you the need, you can still demand for them. They don't need to first be on paper and in law for you to be able to demand for them. That's number one. Number two, there was an issue on what policies can then be implemented. I think a few things. One, we can have like tax waivers for the digital economy because most youth are participating in that. That's what the future is because it's easier for very many reasons. We can have that other perspective of how we can have the youth participation in implementation of this process, to have them included within all those dynamics. But lastly, there was an issue on these emerging technologies. What can we do about them given that they can be evasive? Very simple. That's why I was saying the law is so ambiguous about them. We need to categorize it. For instance, in what instances do we use wiretapping? Not in all instances. When do you use neurochips? Those ones should be eradicated completely.
Thank you.
Because they go against the freedom of thought. That's
you, Edgar.
absolute.
Well, good morning once again. To my brother, with all due respect, I think you had me short when I talked about digital rights and you presumed that they were presumed rights. Well, I gave the definition of digital rights being those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media, as well as access and use computers, other electronic devices, and communication networks. To be on the other hand, I'd like to bring notice to this house that there is no certain point of life ever since, if we're addressing our minds from 2018 up to date, that there is no shortage of headlines about Facebook's privacy issues, about Twitter maybe having privacy issues, about security leakages, especially our privacy. So let's address our minds, if we're talking about emerging technologies, digital rights, let's address our minds to the status quo of our privacy. I do beg to submit. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I had 2 questions. The first was on activism in the context of Uganda. The second was on access to right from Ricky and Mimi, respectively. So the first question, the response is really one, that activism takes a multivariate approach. So there is an existence of aspects such as going to social media to ensure that you create information database for youths to participate, to understand what digital rights are, to understand what emerging technology is, to understand what climatic change and injustice is. The second and more important one is to create social impact, and that's what the activists in the room will tell you. That's what activism is for. So using the existent resources to ensure that happens is the response you get. Simple response to Ricky, the existence of rights are legally protected interests. If there are no legally protected interests, you cannot even start to demand for the existence of what does not happen in the first place. So that's contrast to what Edgar tells you. So without that protection, you can't even begin to have an argument on access. So 2 things as I conclude. What you get from this submission is the synergy among everything. If you understand what we said, you realize that participation in emerging technology helps us solve anthropogenic emissions for climate change while ensuring that we have protection of digital rights. That's a synergy that doesn't come from anyone else. Thank you.
Yes, our last presenter for this moment.
Okay, 3 things. There was a question on inclusion of the youth in the implementation of policies. 2 days ago, the National Youth Council spoke out about how the youth have been excluded in the process of implementing the parish development model. So if the National Youth Council, the umbrella organization of the youth, is saying that, that means already someone is asking that the youth are included in the implementation of policies. So that is very okay. Then secondly, there was a question on meritocracy and gender inclusion. Now, you see, meritocracy looks glamorous. But the problem with meritocracy is that it is a utopian idea that can only exist in a situation where everybody has equal access to opportunities for them to exercise themselves. Then there will be then their merits will be appreciated. But in a context where a father in a poverty-stricken village in Uganda will be forced to take the boy to school and not the girl because he believes the boy is going to be more influential, that situation cannot appreciate meritocracy. So why we want that to happen, we should still actively include the women because they are badly disenfranchised.
Thank you,
meritocracy
Lester.
doesn't help them. Thank you.
Thank you, Lester. Another round of applause, people. I think our judges are going to have a hard time, yeah? Next time, I am going to lobby our hosts that we have 2 days because we could have listened to these people all day, but we do not have time. And you know what I pick out? I really was touched by that last point on merit versus equality, and the guy who asked it said, should we advance equality for the sake of it? So I'm going to encourage the ladies. We are the ones that have not yet attained it. You can see we have one here. We should really, really improve ourselves. We shouldn't just ride on the equality card, but improve ourselves so that the equality, we deserve it. And I am not going to say much more. I am going to invite our judges. I think this has taught us a lesson. In our next session, we'll manage our time better. So our judges, each one is going to have brief remarks about this panel, and the last judge will announce our winner for our winners. Yes, we'll have 2 winners. Should I wait for this? I think I'm suggesting we have a working break. Okay. Yes. Yeah. You are the one who is delaying us. So the judges, you are my elders, but I will give you 2 minutes each.
My dear colleagues, I came in a little late, but these are not strangers to me, so in a way I know the ability to defend things. Anyway, good morning to you. Digital rights, emerging technologies, and climate justice. What is the role of the youth? First of all, I want the audience to put their hands together and clap for this gentleman. I think, and lady. And then also clap for us, because it seems we received them very well before. Because I am excited to be here this morning to listen to them once again. They are, I feel positive about my ability to assess and select. But there's something I continue to see recurring in your debates, and it should where is the other copy of mine? It should be worked on. I do not only see it here, but I also see it in public spaces, intellectual debates. And it takes me deep into this, our living, our being. I hold a doctorate, so I am more interested in our being as a people. I'm not interested much in what happens today that dramatizes us. Because if we forget our being, we will probably not create a foundation and sustain our being. If only what is today's events, what I usually call direct co-materialism, things that affect us and how we should react, and as opposed to things that we must do to survive as human beings. They relate fondly, but usually when a high-level debate like this, because this is a nation, is taking place, I would want to see the foundations of debates, the basis, the components of a debate that have being in them, we and our survival, we the African people and our survival, as opposed to, I'm often criticized for that, as opposed to just reacting to what it is, and we intellectually using English, air it out and appear intellectual when we are actually reacting to the situation and not creating a foundation for our being. And that's what founds my comments this morning. And when you were answering issues of fourth industrial revolution, talking about rapid change, automation, changes in society patterns. I use this. What I understand as rapid change, automation, and changes in society patterns, people, and technologies. I realize that we have young people lost from Africa, dealing with over 38% stuntedness among children between the age of 0 and 5, lost in the global debate. I realized you are in there. You could go to London, it's okay, and I know you like it. But the task is here. 38% children stunted. And you are not fixing the... How will this fourth industrial revolution eat up this 38% stuntedness? As you debated, I'm looking for those small things, and I don't see them. I see people lost in buzzwords, trendy words, and speaking good English. Listen to me, I am very serious about this. And so I am seeing an opportunity, for example, in this artificial intelligence thing. Superhumans like my dear Edgar, yes, helping all of us to live this one life fully. And where are they from? Are they from here, or they are from the West? And what are the interests of the West? Do you think after colonization, these guys have ever stopped? They have imperialism. So then we must talk about politics of involvement in this artificial, in this digital, in producing these technologies, and also making sure people access them. Our people, the 38% stunted people, access them. So, but do you think the imperial man, this global man who is pushing you to globalize and speak great about global trends, interested in your emancipation? I'm talking about in the context of your topic. And this should be the primary issue. And so this comes when your debates are properly founded on what motivates, what your ideas on being are from the point of view of your society, and then how the globe must come in and how we should control it into the future. And so every one of you is good according to me. They are all super, you're all smart, speaking good English, eloquent. But I think we must come home. We must come home to this thinking situation. 38% stuntedness among our children, 28% severe undernourished. Let me use that. But this morning, I am ending. This morning, I was reading. I had not, Sarah, I had not looked at that. In our budget, there is some money. It's about 78 billion that has been allocated to mindset change. This is where I have a problem. Because an education must be based on a philosophy which should have put in place this mindset thing that you are going to treat separately. I don't know what they are going to teach. That people should understand corruption and deal with, and all be corrupt, and we all, I don't know. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I am suggesting that I bring the mic to you to save time. Or do you want to come here? Okay. Okay.
It's slightly rushed because of time. One of the things we've observed, Sarah, is that other than the time for the panelists, that perhaps next time we review these so that the candidates have slightly much more time to make slightly much more detailed submission. I just want to start along that line to say that I'm extremely delighted that Deus and I roasted you guys literally, didn't we? This sort of the first debate. At the time, I was genuinely shocked. I was extremely disappointed, and we expressed it. I was lucky that I had, and indeed the two of us particularly, coming from where he was as a lecturer, and that there would be substantially no prejudice, and you'd not see us in any particular way. To go ahead and try and please you, and then go ahead and compromise the entirety of the process. I want to say that I am suitably impressed by the jump in terms of space, the energy, the tempo, the texture, the context, and for the first time, thankfully, because now we have a visiting observer from nowhere else but the Americas, that, excuse me, you've actually done us relatively proud. Not yet there, as my brother was suggesting, but you've actually generally done us proud. This is a university and inter-university debate of some nature. So you guys, you've substantially improved. Number two, I want to say that really, except again, as I said, for time, generally everybody else did, by and large, what they needed to do. I had said, and we had said then, and now we're all familiar with ourselves, that some of the angles that we say, for the purposes of the judges out down there, if you're going to participate in the debates, if you're going to engage, you need to have depth. By and large, these guys today had depth. You need to have clarity. By and large, these guys, generally, the majority, in fact, nearly all of them had semblance of clarity. You need to have the confidence. Today is so improved that one of the judge panelists that perhaps we should organize a question time session for a couple of you. So you qualify. So you guys move from here and go into the national debate, and there is a general national conversation. So the confidence is up there. I know one of you guys warned me earlier today during breakfast that you noted what we said and you're coming for us. There is evidence you did that. This is an important feedback you must take home. And Sarah, do you know what? I'm actually now consciously convinced that it is possible that in the next 5 years, we may have slightly many more number, perhaps double the number of people in the National Assembly going forward from these teams and this kind of this kind of debate. So, guys, I will clap too. I was impressed. Critical thinking. I've been trying to avoid mentioning individuals, but you know, Garang, you took the debate slightly different angle because from the context, you take it home to the realities on the ground. And of course, backed by everybody else. But I'm singling it out because you give the depth, you give the content, you give the context, and you basically go ahead and haunt. This is what these things are all about. Because these things is not for a debate for you to win. These are debates for you to go ahead and pick policies, analyze, critique, develop, and then particularly when you become a politician like I am, you go ahead and tear apart any policies and programs with the evidence. Go persuade the citizens with the evidence. Go persuade the world with the evidence. To the extent that you're able to give credit where it is actually due on questioning climate change, that how dare Global North test it. It's a very difficult conversation, but you know what? You genuinely qualified it. So anyway, research, structure, challenging the other. And final quick point. You know, when Garang was doing this, I'm just using Garang this time for these purposes, it is actually good to give credit to the other. Yeah. You know, this is not war. It's a competition of ideas. So you guys have all substantially, fundamentally matured. I would not want to say anything except slightly more that, look, you're still slightly a little bit laid back. Slightly a little bit laid back. You just need to put slightly much more energy in that. Jenna, you are a very different person to who you were. You're absolutely up there. The one slight thing where some of these guys are maybe the advantage of lawyers, so don't get carried away. In submission, you had everything, but partly because you were reading, as part of the debate, you know, it takes absolute skills at the presidential level where sometimes they're being helped by articles. But so if you're able to have a bit of your material, own it up and run with it, to the extent that you did, that you even left and moved here to talk to these guys, that was fantastic. But try and put it off the paper and put it onto yourselves, and then you run as Jenna, not the material that you're representing. I think that quickly is really all I can say. And other than that, I think the game is done, and may the best team move forward. Whichever team remains, you guys, we are already very, very far ahead, and all of us are going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. These people being senior to me in position and many other things, I don't like coming to remind them, but Mr. Chan, what?
Okay, good morning. Wow, I came in a tie. I had to remove it because the debate was hot. Very hot. Congratulations to the 6 of you for having put up such a spirited fight. I want to encourage you that among the judges, I'm the only youth, so I've been quite... no, by all definition, like, I qualify. I'm a youth. So thank you very much. I want to make a few observations here. The debate was hot, I must say. I'm impressed. It's my first time to meet, I think, all of you. And what I see is already an amazing team of well-researched individuals who have sat here and showed us exactly what they do and what they intend to do in their leadership career, this being a mentorship program. Now, there are key things you needed to note about this debate. Oh, okay. The key things you needed to note about this debate is about completing the tasks that you are given. You're given 3 topics. I think not all of you finished the topics. Within the 5 minutes, you had, done only 1 or 2, which was a bad thing. Because when we are telling you, we look at your knowledge on all the 3 topics, and we judge you basing on that. But I must say, even the 1 or 2 that you discussed, it was impressive. I think we have restricted ourselves, being youth and young, we have restricted ourselves, particularly on emerging technology. We are looking much more into the social media. We are not looking at other sectors. Well, emerging technology is cross-cutting from fintech. How many of you know fintech? You deliberately left it out. How many of you know how the banking sector has improved? There is a lot of interconnectivity between all these areas here, and that is what the 4th Industrial Revolution is. So I think we need to broaden our understanding. We need to broaden our reasoning in terms of how, in terms of when, and where to apply this information here. One of the key things is you need to complete a point, even if there is limited time. I noticed some of you not completing points. You are jumping here and there, without deliberately focusing on that. So it also affects you in the long run, in that your point gets lost around the way. For you, and you didn't complete your points, I'm sure they're around here. But nonetheless, it was impressive. I must say, good job, and I look forward to seeing the winner. But lastly, your response to questions is amazing. I think I give it up to you guys. You did very well. I think even the audience can bear me witness. Whose question wasn't attempted well? I think yours wasn't attempted well? Why? It wasn't answered. Maybe you didn't address it to the right panelist. Sorry? Oh, you addressed it to the lady. You missed that mark. So you have to be, she's very sorry she didn't hear you. So you must be very particular on who is asking and how you're going to respond. And most importantly, when you're responding to a question and you know the person who has asked it, make sure that there is eye contact so the person can really know that you are addressing their question. So thank you very much, and good luck to all of you. I look forward to seeing the leading team. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chanwat. Our last judge, Miss Ture. If you like, I could bring the microphone. If you want. We are both can she be giving her presentation as the... Yeah, she wants to give a few comments.
I can chip in with general observations. One is to thank all of you panelists. You've really given us a very good debate. And congratulations, because as I had told you before, you are all winners for having reached at this stage. So the rest of what the judges are going to announce, that's just the detail. Joseph did mention that maybe we need more time. Yeah, our standard has been 2 hours, because even if you can imagine, like, face the Prime Minister in the British Parliament, you don't have a whole day, yet you are discussing matters of national importance. So that's part of the training. You should be able to come around and express yourself on very hard questions, as you saw from what the moderators were firing. But the panel was up to that task. They need a little adjustment, including pushing the moderator if you need to make your case. So you can say, I need 1 more minute to conclude. So it's not that they ring the bell and then you put the microphone down. And all these things happen in developed democracies. So we are not modeling the youth based on our faulty democracy. We are modeling them based on international practice. So the judges, I see, now also need more time. And my next comment is to the judges, that when the debate shifts to the audience, then the judges should do their tabulation, not waiting for completion of the audience. The competition basically ends before the audience comes in. The rest of the concluding remarks, if you have time, you can look at it, but the main 95% of the debate ends before it shifts to the audience. So the judges, once the debate shifts to the audience, then you start doing your tabulations so that everything ends on time. We adopted this model because of the television component. If it wasn't for the benefits of the digital revolution, we would be using purely commercial TV, and we used to work with NTV where you buy 2 hours and it's 2 hours. So there is no extra single minute. So our modeling of the debate is strictly to take care of the TV component, and also maybe to the moderators that we should all work strictly within the time allocated. On the bit of questions, yeah, maybe we can discuss that, the time for answering questions, whether 2 minutes were enough, but the panel did so well. And I only came in to buy time for the judges, to congratulate them, because the final judge should come with the results. And we shall announce only number 1 and 2 that are going to the finals, and they congratulate the rest as they wait to receive their certificates and other communications. So the judges are ready? Back to the moderator.
Thank you very much. The judges are ready, and Miss Ture is the one who is going to tell us what came out of this. I don't enter position right now as judges here. And also, I wanted to say that, Garang, I liked that you cheer people. I just was getting confused that are you asking something? That's the thing. It's good to be our own cheerleaders in this. Yes, Miss Fatuma, you have the floor. Jaja. There's no gray hair, but I am very sorry, Jaja. Jaja today, Fatuma, please. You have, I think you can use this one.
Good morning again, everybody. I don't think I need this. I was also once a youth, and one day you'll be like me. I just wanted to make a few comments before we come up with the final result. Can you hear me?
We need to hear you better, Jaja.
But maybe your mic is non-functional. Can you hear me at the back? Because I don't like to shout. I just wanted to make a comment about meritocracy. Because meritocracy also goes with equal opportunity. As a Pan-Africanist, I study the whole of Africa, from the dawn of time up to today, and what we have gone through as a people, with special emphasis on what African women have gone through. I'd like to bring 2 cases to your attention to illustrate what I'm trying to say. How many of you have heard of the late Sarah Ntiro, not Sarah Birete, Sarah Ntiro? Yes. Are you really Ugandans? Are you really activists? Do you know your country and its history? An incident occurred in the 1940s at the university, at Makerere University. Sarah Ntiro entered the amphitheater. She was a mathematics student. So she's sitting there waiting for the lecturer to come in, a certain Muzungu, sorry to use racial terms, who then asked the young lady, "Are you looking for the nurses' hostel?" She said, "Oh, who is he referring to?" She said, "No, but I'm a student here." The lecturer grabbed his part of his things, got into his car, and drove to Entebbe which was then the capital of the Protectorate of Uganda, protested to the governor, I forget which governor it was in those days, Cohen or one of them, that I did not come to Africa to teach mathematics to women. And Sarah Ntiro had to change her course. So you understand what I'm trying to say. Secondly, how many of you have heard of the country called Chad? What do you know about Chad? Edgar, what do you know about Chad? It's not in West Africa, it's in North Central. Anyway, this is not about geography. We are still talking mathematics. Chad belonged to what was known as French Equatorial Africa, which encompassed the colonies of Chad, Congo, what is now Central African Republic, and Gabon. And when they did an exam, sometimes in the 1930s, the brightest student in the French Equatorial Africa was a little girl called Louise, who got 100% in mathematics, whereupon the governor almost got a heart attack. Louise could not continue because girls did not do mathematics, so she had to become a teacher. So when you are talking meritocracy, there is also equal opportunity, and remember, we are in a patriarchal setting. So nobody has been given anything for free. They have had to fight for it, including judges standing here. So I think you should study what happens in other countries or what happens in your own country. You need to know the history of your country and how various sectors have struggled, and not just the politicians. There's been struggle in the academy, struggle in business, struggle everywhere. That's why we say Aluta. So now, may I continue with the rest of my introduction? My colleagues and I have come to the conclusion. The debate, as they have said, was of high quality. We are very impressed. In fact, stellar quality. The second runner-up, Garang, Nkumba University. And the first runner-up, Edgar, Mbararara. And I think I'll stop here before the governor comes in to chase me out of this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And you are all winners. For me, I said if I was seated here, I would say I have abdicated that responsibility. I am really grateful that I had a chance to host these people. I think all the bright students came in one group, and it was hard to find more than 2 winners here. Can we give a round of applause to these people as they... I would like to keep these interactions with you. I am very, very impressed, and the bright of our country, as the president said at one time, is very future. And I am, and I am also hoping that Mr. Osheno is the one who said our National Assembly will have, so I'm hoping that at one point, that will be what we consider to elect people to the National Assembly, because as of now, I don't think so. Thank you very much, all of you. I am very happy to have been here with you, and we shall continue these engagements with you. Yes, you can take your seats. So yes, as they go, as our panelists leave, I am going to repeat for clarity. Jaja was very soft-spoken. Our winners for today, Garang, Lester, and Edgar Mutungisa. And we are very, very grateful. The rest of you all did very well. I am going to ask that our judges get 5 minutes for a cup of tea. You can come with it. Yes, You can come with it here, or you can. I can bring it for you, Jaja. For you, I can. Okay. And in those 5 minutes, I am hoping our next panelists had already taken a cup of tea. I hope you guys are still listening. The next Drake Onen, at least I know you are in the next group, so I am talking to you and the rest, that we will want in those 5 minutes to have the next group here. So that as our judges are getting a cup of tea and getting back, we have you seated and settled in, and then we can start. Of tea? No, they already should have, because they have been there. They have been in the audience. They all should have. So the next
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated. Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated. Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others.
Round for the finals. So will it be your university? We are yet to find out. I would like to reintroduce the panelists to the judges. Our first panelist from Uganda Christian University is Mr. Douglas Drake Onen. You can stand up. So that is Douglas representing Uganda Christian University. Our second panelist from Uganda Martyrs University, Nkozi, is Miss Nalukaake Rachael. I'm watching to see who is not clapping. Our third panelist for today's round, for the second round of the semifinals, from Busitema University is Mr. Ngabirano Titus. Our fourth panelist from Kabale University is Mr. Oscar Amanya. Fifth panelist from Kampala International University is Mr. Ogutu Titus. So we have two Titus on the panel today. Do we call them Tituses or Titus? So we have two Titus or Tituses on the panel today. Our sixth panelist from Makerere University Business School is Mr. Simon Luswata. Okay. So our dear judges have taken up their seats and the debate is ready to kickstart. And as I stated earlier, we are sticking to the same debate rules. The first 2 minutes protected, the last 3 minutes unprotected. Agatha and I will time you at different times. We will signal when you've used your 2 minutes to show that you're entering your unprotected time, meaning points of information can now be asked. And then we shall signal when you're left with 5 seconds to summarize. So let us put our hands together and welcome from Uganda Christian University, Mr. Douglas Drake Onen. Douglas, you're welcome.
Douglas Drake Onen is my name. I'm from Uganda Christian University, a student of law. Well, in analyzing this topic, I'm going to use 7 words. I'm going to use the words of equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. Now, in using those particular words in analyzing this topic, I will show you, I'll answer the question in 3 different ways, and later on go ahead and show you how we can solve this particular problem of gender inequality, and later on give you a cost-benefit analysis of how my solution works out. Well, understanding gender inequality, I would possibly just put it as gender equality refers to the state in which access to rights and opportunities is unaffected by our gender or our sexes, which means woman or man can be in position to access all opportunities without being discriminated on their gender. Allow me give you a historical framework of gender inequality in three different prongs. The first prong is going to be the religious prong. The second one is going to be on the cultural perspective. Let's start religiously. I'm going to look at the perspective of a Christian and Muslim. We have over 100 Bible verses that are against or suggest or foster gender inequality. And also we have verses in the Quran. For example, in the Bible, we have 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 12, that suggests that I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. That's the first chapter. That's the first book in the Bible among the 99 others. How about in the Quran? In the Quran, I think it's chapter 2, verse 228, it says that wives have the same rights as husbands have on them in accordance with the general known principles. Of course, men are a degree above them in status. Now, this particular religious perspective just brings to us a clear view of what gender inequality is enshrined religiously. Now, let me go to the cultural perspective. We as Africans, we often know, or as we grew up, we all know that we're in a society where women have been greatly discriminated. I know this particular topic will further foster basically on women, but later on I'll also bring out the aspect of the boy child. But since we're talking about gender equality, it primarily centers on the women. Now, culturally, when growing up, all of us, I grew up in a family whereby my mom is a housewife and my dad goes to work. So what does that mean? If my family is in such a particular state, how many more families are there like that, that women are not given the opportunity to go out and have access to opportunities because of their gender? Now, that's the cultural perspective that I would love to give. Now, what is the legal framework that we have in place? Now, that will bring us to the first part of my analysis, which is equality of opportunity. Now, equality of opportunity, we have the legal frameworks that are in place. Our constitution, the 1995 constitution, provides in Article 21, provides for equality and freedom from discrimination. Now, that's the first legal framework that we have in the constitution. Which other provision do we have in the constitution that provides for gender equality? We have Article 32 that provides for affirmative action. Now, that is the legal framework. We have the legal framework at place. What does that mean? That as Uganda, in answering the question of, are there opportunities? Obviously, there are opportunities. The legal framework is already in place. But let me start by answering the other question of, have Ugandans attained gender equality? Now, a report released by UN Women suggested that gender inequality continues to be a fundamental impediment to human progress. Now, what does to be achieved? Yeah? So in answering the question of, have Ugandans attained gender equality, I would love to assert that no. Why do I assert that no? That we have not yet attained gender equality. However, we have made significant strides. We have made significant strides politically, socially, and economically. Now, that is the equality of opportunity that I'm talking about. Now,
you have a point of information.
Yes?
Thank you. So my question is simple, back on your point of religion. You said I don't want to bring the family aspect. My question is simple. Does the Bible govern your day-to-day life?
Well, me as a Christian, I wouldn't go against your question. Yes, the Bible governs my life and it's an authority, but since we're not in matters of discussing religion, I would stick to the topic of discussion today. So according to the 2018 Commission report on the status of women, the Commission acknowledges that all rural women and girls face discrimination. And in Uganda, most of our population, 75% of our population is rurally based. Now, what does that mean? That we people that are centrally placed in in urban centers would not understand the effects of gender inequality that are in rural areas because of this. Now, in my discussion, I'll clearly bring out the political, social, the challenges that are at place, and then later on summarize with solutions and the cost-benefit analysis. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Let us clap for Douglas from Uganda Christian University. Our second panelist to make her presentation is Ms. Nalukaake Rachael from Uganda Martyrs University in Nkozi. Rachael, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. My name is Nalukaake Rachael from Uganda Martyrs University in Nkozi. So I will begin by defining to us what gender equality is. According to the gender glossary of terms and concepts, gender equality is the concept that women and men, girls and boys have equal conditions, they have equal treatments, they have equal opportunity. Also, according to UNICEF, the gender action plan means that women and men, again, have women and men, girls and boys, enjoy the same rights, resources, and opportunity. So from that, I'm going to show you that the concept of gender equality has been pushed by inequalities towards women in Uganda. Back then in Uganda is patriarchal society where we know that men are more favoring, like a man is the head of the family and all that. So from such a mindset, yes, of Uganda, we get to know that that is where gender equality starts from. So this was broken in May 1962 when the first woman MP joined parliament. That was Florence Alice Lubega. She was the first woman to join parliament. That's when we saw different organizations coming in to empower women, because they had seen that women are not involved in this thing. Then another case is for the first panel that we had here, there was only one lady. So is there gender equality? Even the second, is there gender equality? That brings me to the question. Has Uganda attained equality? Yes, it has attained equality, but not to the equality that we actually need.
You have a point of information.
Yes, thank you very much. A matter of fact, I want to correct the speaker that when CCG was organizing this, it was a panel of 2 ladies and 2 gents. So the reason why we have 1 lady or 2 ladies on the panel, it zeroes down to the part of merit over gender. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much. Also to answer that is, I was going to bring that in to show you that I was going to bring that in the part of the challenges. Women don't come out like to really stand out. That is where I was going to bring it in. Like they do not enforce, but yeah. Then also like my stand was we have not yet attained. We have attained. There are steps that have been put there, but we have not attained the equality that we actually need.
You have the point of information.
Thank you, madam. Now, in the light that you have said that women do not come up, do you then argue in the line of affirmative action or on male?
Pardon? Come again, please.
In the light that you have said that women do not come up, do you then argue that the solution would be affirmative action to address such a challenge, or we should stick to male?
Okay, maybe to answer that, I would say that they should put different sensitizations, like to equip women, to tell them that you can actually come up and stand for even such positions. Then the reason why I say, to go back to my point, is the reason why I say that Uganda has not attained the equality we need is the different political parties that we have in Uganda. All of them, most of them, their leaders are men. The NRM, we have President Museveni. The DP, we have Honorable Robert Mao. FDC, sorry, we have Amanya. That shows that we have actually not attained the equality that we need. So even in the economic status, the Uganda is, the economy of Uganda is more sustained with the men, like do. So that shows that we have not actually attained the equality that we need. Wow. Okay, maybe to as a complete, I would like to give one of the opportunities. Like the first opportunity is like in Uganda we have seen, because of gender equality, women have been given a chance. Senior 6 girls have been given a chance, and they add 1.5 on their results. So that shows, because it empowers women, so that shows that there are steps that have been taken to actually attain gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachael. That was Rachael from Uganda Martyrs University in Nkozi. Let us welcome Mr. Ngabirano Titus from Busitema University. Titus, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ngabirano Titus, a final year student of Polymer, Textile and Industrial Engineering from Busitema University. And today we are discussing the motion, have Ugandans attained gender equality? What are the opportunities and challenges for gender equality in Uganda? First and foremost, my pre-speakers have given us a detailed definition of gender equality, but they failed to give us justification on how they're weighing the gender equality where Uganda stands currently. Currently, the current measure we are using to justify gender equality and gender inequality is a gender inequality index. A gender inequality index is a composite measure reflecting inequality in achievements between women and men in 3 dimensions. 1, reproductive health, 2, empowerment, and 3, the labor market, according to the World Health Organization and according to the United Nations Development Program. Now, in 1995, when we were drafting the Constitution, before the introduction of the affirmative action, the gender inequality index of Uganda stood at 0.651. To put it into greater context, you'll get to realize that in 1995, the share of seats in parliament in Uganda was 18.1, whereas that of men was 81.9, giving us a gap of 63.8%. Fast forward to 2019, we get to realize that GII, which is a gender inequality index, for context, when I say GII, it is gender equality index, is currently at 0.535. You get to realize that over the years, ever since the introduction of affirmative action, and I want us to be guided, affirmative action does not only state the addition of 1.5 points to the ladies, but also incorporates the introduction of evening classes, and also incorporates the introduction of weekend lessons. We get to realize that all these things were done in order, not necessarily to give women an upper hand, but in order to give us and attain gender equality at the end of the day. It is on this basis, therefore, that with Uganda's GII at 0.35, we get to realize that the world average of 0.436, we as a nation, we are not yet there, but we shall be there. And as if I put into comparison with other East African major nations of Tanzania and Kenya, with one of Tanzania at 0.556 and one of Kenya at 0.518, Uganda is doing favorably well. Moving forward, Uganda is a patriarchal society. Putting into context, it is a society that either favors the men or ladies as a dominant species. And putting Uganda into comparative, you get to realize that Uganda is predominantly, and we have the mindset that the men are supposed to govern us at the end of the day. Now, when I put moving forward to the part...
You have a point of information.
Yes.
Thank you. Now that you argue that we are not yet there, but we are to get there, and in terms of affirmative action, do you believe that when we get there, we should scrap off the affirmative action?
Yes, Yes, thank you very much. In relation to the point of affirmative action, I would like to guide the fellow panelists and the House here and online that affirmative action was introduced in 1995 and given a time frame of 20 years. When you get to realize that after those 20 years, most of these laws were supposed to be revised and adjusted. But to our decimal legislators at the end of the day, some of these laws have not been revised up to date. Therefore, moving forward, I would like to state the context. I would like us to give an example of education. Now, according to a report in 2011 by Alice Merab Kagoda for the IIEP, a scholar at Makerere University, you get to realize that currently in Uganda, when you look at education enrollment, the enrollment of men in comparison to women is 50.1% for the men and 49.9% for the ladies. But then that does not reflect in educational leadership. And now that is where the challenges begin to reflect at the end of the day. Now, if I just give an example of educational leadership, and I give an example of 2 universities, all public universities, that is Makerere University and my very own Busitema University. Of the top management committee at Makerere University, which is 10, only 2 are female. At Busitema University, of the 7 top management committee, only 2 are female. You get to realize that even with the education enrollment, most of the challenges that are hindering some of these ladies to roll into the educational leadership as just a basis to give us a broader picture of what is affecting the nation at large. You get to realize that some of the challenges they are facing are structural barriers, multiple roles, transparency, society, and harassment. You should also note that one of the key hindrances of us as a nation is that we're a patriarchal society. As by us being a patriarchal society, we're already fooled by the point of bias on the ladies. 2, I would like to summarize in like 1 minute or less. Thank you very much. You can realize that we have this burden that we have to that we have to incorporate most of these things at the end of the day. Now, of the opportunities, I'll only list like 3 or 4 opportunities. Now, we as a land generation, we can move Uganda forward. 2, we also have programs that have been put in place to make Uganda a better place. The Uganda Women Empowerment Program, the Youth Livelihood Program, the Labor Works Program, and Social Assistance Grants for Empowerment. I would like to submit for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was Ngabirano Titus. Let us welcome to the podium Mr. Oscar Amanya from Kabale University.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Oscar Amanya from Kabale University, a very rural university in Kabale. And I'm here to make a case for the rural woman, a rural girl, a rural boy, without segregating. Now, before getting any further, I would like to say that this case I'm going to argue will also really tackle the issue that our Dr. Judge brought about the 17 billion addressed to the mindset change. I will argue a case that shows you that gender inequality basically in Uganda is because of the society norms and conservative attitudes that we have in people of Uganda, and that if we address that, that will be the most sustainable solution to gender inequality. Now, why is affirmative action not a sustainable solution to gender inequality? I asked the question, if after 20 years we achieve gender parity because of affirmative action, shall we then scrap gender affirmative action? And people said yes, because it was set for 20 years. Now, if it was set for 20 years and we scrap off affirmative action, and then this was the very policy that was letting these women come up, letting these women take a position, shall that then mean that if we don't have that policy, we shall thrive or we shall get back to the inequality? So that's why we need to address the mindset and the cultural norms and the conservative attitudes that we have in Ugandans, so that after the affirmative action policies, we can have a sustainable gender equality. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before I go any further, let me define gender equality in a simple situation. And I believe that gender equality is an environment that prevents fair opportunities on merit to all people, regardless of who they identify as. Female, male, or even we can bring in the other aspect of the LGBT, because it is coming, and we cannot do away with that. Thank you. So we want to look at how best can these people, regardless of who they identify as, will come up on board and actually get fair opportunities in all situations. Now, let me set the metrics, because I'm being asked the question, have Ugandans attained gender equality? The metrics are simple. According to the UN Women data, which uses the indicators perspective on the sustainable development goals, in February 2021, 42.6% were the only indicators that were available for Uganda to indicate gender equality. That means that there was about 54% of the indicators that are globally used that are not available in Uganda. And and by that, we would argue that we actually have not attained gender inequality. But I don't want to argue the statistics way. I want to argue the qualitative way. Because if we go to the statistics, like he said, in the recent Makerere University graduation, for example, 51% of the graduates were females. But then, does that represent in our society? Does that show in the very fields that we all love? Let us, for example, take STEM, science, technology, and mathematics, which is actually the future of this country. For example, if they are saying we are enhancing salaries of scientists, how many people, or how many women, how many girls will benefit in the enhancement of that salary for that matter? It means that the education by the numbers is there, but are we going to the relevant field? Are we getting the quality of education, and which is very equal regardless of the
You have point of information.
Yes, I'll take that.
Thank you very much. When you say 51% graduate, and then they do not reflect in the job market. Does that answer the question of merit or gender equality? Which one of the two? Thank you.
Thank you. My whole case about the 51% is that, yes, by numbers, we are there. But what about the quality? Which kind of people do we need? And which kind of degrees are these people getting? If we believe the future is STEM, for example, like I gave you, does that mean if you go to science sectors, how many people do you find there? Now, how does this bring the challenge that I already answered already, which was attitude and conservative norms?
Thank you so much, Honorable. With due respect, you mentioned that the future of this country is science and wherever. So we are discussing gender equality. Are you trying to say those in the art sides are going to be marginalized once again?
Thank you.
Thank you. Are they human beings? Are these special creatures?
Thank you. I didn't say arts are not important. Arts are equally important. But I'm saying that where we derive, where the future is headed, if we were here discussing artificial intelligence, we shall basically see that we are progressing in science. And then the other thing is that we have already attained gender parity in arts. So what is happening in science that is stopping gender parity in science? That is the very thing that I'm trying to address right now. And this is the case, that some students, for example, I will need 1 minute. Okay, thank you. That, for example, the example I was giving in science, that some girls in schools are not encouraged to take up mathematics, basically because of some old sciences, like he said, basically because the culture still believes that those are courses for men. People cannot do engineering because some societies still believe that they are those stereotypical kind of things. I will submit more in my next submission. Thank you, dear panel and the audience.
Thank you. So that was Mr. Oscar Amanya from Kabale University. Let's welcome to the podium from Kampala International University, Mr. Ogutu Titus. Titus, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Titus Ogutu, son of Ogutu from the mighty Kampala International University. On that point, the last one, culture, I will mingle you together with my brother, Drake, who spoke about religion and culture. The first question is, he provided for us that Uganda has legal framework, 70%, to be specific, the statistics. Do these legal frameworks meet the cultural expectations of the societies that they are being put in? That is a question for you to think about. So if they do not meet the expectations of society, then they are useless, they're irrelevant. The reason why I asked Douglas why the Bible is useful in his day-to-day life, that is because religion uses the Bible. So if the Bible is affecting society, then we should do away with the Bible, since it was written by human beings. However, that does not discriminate or take away the point that you remain a Christian with the core principles of Christianity. Thank you so much. Now, to head to the next point, my brothers say that science is the way to go. I do not clearly understand. We are talking about gender equality. Gender equality is a human right. It's actually the mother of all rights. Okay? Then you're literally saying we are not discussing anything here. So we are discussing a diverse topic. Do not be limited to one field. To begin my presentation, ladies and gentlemen, this is a discussion coming from a social point, a cultural point, a political point, and an economic perspective. Let's not be rigid on only one aspect of science. We need to have the fact that the world is developing at a higher pace. An organic problem will always emerge at any given time. So when you come here and you say that we should actually prioritize scientists to have good incentives, then you should be prepared for the outcomes. Do not look at the process rather than forgetting the outcomes. My brother gave us here statistics of Makerere University graduating more women, less than, he was talking about gender parity. But does this translate in the quality of life we see today? We still have gender-based violence happening. We still have gender inequalities in society. We still see girls raped. We still see teenage pregnancy. We still see child marriage. Have you gone to the root to know the challenges that actually society is facing before you make any point? Ladies and gentlemen, my discussion, I will give him my last minute. Please relax. So my discussion or my concept comes from a point of, okay, please.
Thank you. You needed this right now. Would you please compare the gender parity ratios in arts fields and science fields, and then you argue against my point.
Thank you so much. You're not going to limit my beautiful presentation on arts and sciences. Thank you so much. So my discussion is on gender economic development. We are looking at gender economic development, and this has to come from social aspects, economic aspects, and the political aspects. Now, we all know that gender, these are basically attitudes of whether you're either female or male. And when you talk about equality, you're basically saying that we should have an equal access to some of these opportunities. Now, I have a problem. I like to be real. Does Uganda government provide sustainable avenues to create these successful opportunities that can actually see the thriving of gender equality as an ideology or as an idea? You will clearly understand that some of these ideas are just not embedded in the 1995 Constitution, but they stem back from the American Independence Declaration, from the French Declaration of Human Rights, coming down to the Universal Declaration. And you need to be sensitive with the common sense of our age. When you look at the French Declaration, it says that all men are born free and equal. When you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it says that all persons, you need to be sensitive that previously, yes, there was actually this biased mindset against the female gender. But there was only one problem. Why? Because the male gender was being filmed and put to the world. But the female gender remained on the other side, and they did not clearly say. Yes, I will take you.
Thank you very much, fellow panelists. I would like to guide that Uganda has a framework and a body or policy that governs all these things. It's the Uganda Gender Policy of 2007.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was coming there. So Uganda has the gender policy. Thank you so much for quickening my work. The question is to answer you, okay? The gender equality policies that continue to be put in place, or those that you mentioned about, and the continued mismatch. When I say mismatch, I mean the continued gender-based violences or gender-based inequalities that still exist in societies. Do we still need some of these policies? To answer your question specifically, we need to ask two questions. Why are some of these policies working, and how are they working? However, we shouldn't rush in addressing more policies just because we need to show the public that actually we are doing something about it. We need to ask ourselves, why is there still a gender pay gap? My brother, you know, the reason why I was running away from your discussion of gender parity is because you're saying arts and sciences. So when you pay more of the scientists and you don't pay the arts, and I'm imagining a family which has a man and the woman is earning 50 million, and the nigger is earning 1 million. Are you okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was Mr. Ogutu Titus from Kampala International University. So let us welcome Mr. Simon Luswata, representing Makerere University Business School.
Thank you so much. The most decorated debater from my university, Sam, loves to call it the Harvard of Africa. I want to start, first of all, by answering the question of the challenges that are presented. We've discussed data, we've discussed the figures and all that. They talked about affirmative action. I think the purpose of affirmative action is not to create a world where women compete with themselves, but to empower them and compete with the male. Today, 33% of the parliament is made up of women, something like about 188 MPs against 368 who are male. 146 of these around come as women representatives in constituencies where they compete with themselves. But a few of them come on the direct seat. So we can see that affirmative action is not achieving the purpose of giving women empowerment to compete directly with the male. It's either they are given a comfort zone where they do not actually think of moving out, or they are not empowered enough. Because we should ask this question, does also representation tantamount to influence, because you could be in a place, we've seen the numbers grow, we've seen the parliament grow bigger every day. They create new constituencies. That means members are going to be many, but how influential are they when we are making policies? How can they make their voices heard when we are making policies? That is what we discuss when we talk about affirmative action. We've had the cabinet move from 27% to 43% representation of women. It's not yet 50, but you see, what positions do they hold? We always diss the position of vice president in Uganda. That is a ceremonial position. When we give them the key roles, do they have the power? Yes, they're going to say prime minister and all those. How many of those have we had to start discussing whether this works or not? We go to education. Recent data shows that 53% of girls aged 16 to 12 are reported to complete the 7 years of primary education. Merely 25% of the females enroll for secondary school. When you bring affirmative action and take it to universities and add these people points and then introduce evening classes, don't you think there is a step you're missing? You're not hitting the target. Because what about these people that do not get to the position where they can enroll for universities?
Yes, thank you very much, fellow panelists, for that beautiful presentation. But a quick one. Do you believe that number translates to power?
I started by asking a question. Power means influence. Does the number that we see in parliament, is it influential enough for you to assume that the voices of the women are heard when we go to parliament, even in the affirmative action that you talk about? You people discuss universities, but you see, when you see a very big gap between the people who enroll for primary school, the girls who enroll for primary school, and those who get to secondary school, then there is a very big number that we lose in the middle of the journey that is not accounted for anywhere when we are discussing the policies that are meant to bring the equality that we talk about. The right to own property. I will discuss this in the things I'm going to say next before I complete this question. That you see, women are majorly people in the villages who are employed by the agriculture sector, and they only practice subsistence farming. For farming, you need land. That's where we talk about the right to property. Yes, our constitution has all this. And I'll say something before I continue. We have a very legal framework, a very good one. We are not in the fishes of law. But you see, this law does not come out. When we see the cases that are never completed in time in courts, when we see, because one can tell you 56% of women in Uganda, aged between 15 and 49, reported to have experienced physical violence. And 22% of those have experienced sexual violence. But when you see the courts not handling their cases so well, because we also have a problem with the courts, it's either the case will not be completed on time, or you will see these women being embarrassed in court, because these cases are even very complicated to win. The legal system is very complicated for them. How many of them can assess a lawyer to go to court and defend themselves whenever we have this? Because for you to have a good law, you must have a good court. When you have courts like ours, when you have a legal framework like ours, it's either you're going to alienate the vast majority of women from reporting the cases where their rights have been violated, or you're going to give a go-ahead of the perpetrators to be confident enough to do these things. After all, they're not going to be touched in any way. But that's what I was going to when I talked about rights to owning property. And that's where we discuss the land. But we have a problem with mindset. That even up to now, we believe when a girl is given land or to inherit land from their father, there are people who still think it's inappropriate. They still have this mindset that maybe women are inferior, that you're supposed to give that to a boy who knows the better use of it all. And then that's where we lose it.
To wrap up.
That's why we lose it.
5 seconds to wrap up.
I wanted to talk about the economy, where we miss it when we are discussing this. When you leave out women from getting the education, you lose it that you have a redundant labor force. You have to get taxes from these people, but you do not even get them because they do not work. There is a very big sector in the unpaid employment, and that is the women, that we do not tax in any way, but they get services that they require, the health services, and then the other things that government has to pay for. And then there is a very redundant workforce that we could make use of, because human resource is fundamental for economic development. I beg to submit.
Another round of applause for our panelists. Very, very well done thus far. I was looking at Simon and thinking I thought I was the only informal person who dresses casually, but I think that's why I have let you go on for 10 more seconds. We have We are going in for questioning. It's time for you people to ask questions, but before we do that, I wanted to remind those who will make it to the finals, we have two who have already made it, that our topic for the finals will be Uganda's economy. Whatever question about the economy that will come your way, you must be prepared for it. Yes, the judges, I am sure you already have enough to start on your deliberations as we go through the questions. I'm going to start this time. I am going to start from the other end with you, Simon. And the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what would it take for Uganda to eliminate the existing gender biases in our society?
I think two things. One, the government of Uganda has to be very intentional when fighting poverty. You see, when we look at societies that are very impoverished, you talk of Karamoja, the northern region, that's where people are very poor. Those are the societies that violate women's rights so much. We've seen the role models in this country. You cannot tell me that people know that the speaker of this current parliament is Betty Annette Among, a woman, and then they do not want to take their kid to school and be the same as Anita Among. But when people are poor, they look at these girls as some sort of commodity that they can give away anytime and get money simply because they are poor. When they see a 13-year-old girl that they are spending on money seated at home, but they can get married off and they get $1 million, that is why you lose it. So I think the government of Uganda has to know that there are very big challenges that are presented by the poverty, and be intentional is a key word when fighting poverty. And then the other thing, I think we should embrace telling people that, you see, women can do these things. Take them to school and then use them as examples to change the mindset of people. When you have affirmative action, but then women can be there for all that they care. People become so big, somebody can become a member of parliament and still come as a woman representative of a certain district. They don't go to compete for the other. Let us use these policies the way they're supposed to be used to serve the purposes that they're supposed to serve. I think for now we should be discussing putting a term limit on this affirmative action sits in parliament, or even any other way that we give these people affirmative action, and then go back and make sure students from primary education get the necessary education to come up to school. Because when you educate the people, that's when you reduce a bias. Because even mindset doesn't even just come with you putting mindset change programs, as some people will say, but comes with you giving people the opportunities to go to school and know a life better than just that when they go and get married.
Thank you. The next question is, it's not the same question as what Simon answered. Mr. Ogutu, the scourge of teenage mothers during COVID lockdowns has been described as a pandemic within a pandemic. What can we do as a country to avoid the situation of a lost generation?
Well, thank you so much. The first question is, what are the lessons that we have learned from the pandemic? That's the first question. One, Ugandans may say we were not prepared, but anyway, you have to be prepared anytime. So, what were the causes of teenage pregnancy in the lockdown? One, they did not have access to resources. Basically, the financial muscle was limited because we were under lockdown. And then secondly, parents did not have anything useful to do than even including, I don't mean useful to do, but like taking care or grooming some of these girls. They did not spend enough time with them. Children were just left around to loiter, go this one, go this. And some of them decided to put in their interests than the interests of their children. Because when you take a child to school, you should expect a lot from that child. Because education limits the chances that this girl might get into trouble. And one day, she will be a productive person. So I think we need to have a critical rethinking of when calamities happen and how prepared are we. So, and that is where the question goes back to the Ministry of Gender. What did the Ministry of Gender do? So, I, as a person, I feel that some of these things can be best addressed if we have engagements. Because, we live in a country whereby the district a district health officer is not even qualified to be a district health officer, might not have even qualifications. District education officers, not even qualified to be a district education officer, just put there to enjoy that space. So what are some of these initiatives that can actually hold on to the family? Because if you want to develop a family, then you must make sure that the family is at peace. And secondly, it must have a conducive environment of peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Titus. The next question goes to Oscar Kabale, University. Oscar is representing the rural woman, so I would like you to tell us what progress, if any, you think Uganda has made in the quest for gender equality.
Thank you very much. First of all, for clarity, Team Kabale University does not argue against arts, but it argues for gender parity across all fields. That is one. Secondly, my case is about the rural woman. We have made progress with the urban woman. For example, if you look at here, we have very many women, and that is because of the elite setting that some of them come from. So, yes, there is progress for the elite woman, for the urban woman, and my case for the rural woman is that we have not made enough progress. People in the rural areas are still abusing the rights of women. They still believe that women cannot do anything. That's why we are making a case for changing the mindset. The people there in Karamoja, people in deep rural areas of Chigezi are still stereotypical, that they think the society is still patriarchal, and therefore, if I'm arguing my case of rural women, we have not made giant progress until we address gender stereotypes.
Thank you, Oscar. Ngabirano, Titus, for you, do you think the urban woman have we made progress? What is the status of the progress we've made in that quest for an equal world for men and women?
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. And to rush through the part of the urban woman, you get to realize that the way you classify an urban woman zeroes down to you in two aspects. An urban woman could be a person in the urban setting, or could just be a person who is land but living in the rural setting. It entirely depends on how you want to define an urban woman. And basing on statistics, you get to realize that the women, when you consider a statistic in gender-based violence, you get to realize that the number of cases of urban women reporting cases related to gender-based violence zeroes down to less than 30% as compared to over 60% in the rural areas. That is as per the UBOS report of 2019, the Uganda Bureau of Statistics. But then I would also like to hint on some of what my fellow panelists said. One of Mr. Simon said that affirmative action needs time frame. You get to realize that every policy designed, be it by Uganda, we tend to be so negative. But then be it Uganda or any country in the world, every policy has a time frame. Affirmative action had a time frame of 20 years. But then it was now back to the legislators to either update the affirmative action and see what needs to be adjusted. One other panelist came here and talked of hypotheses. When you say that the person in the healthcare office is not necessarily qualified, you have to give us justification and at least an example to justify your statement. You cannot come here and give us an hypothesis and want us to base on it for the basis of argument. Now, my brother here talked about progress in gender equality, and I stated in 1995 as compared to 2019, when you consider the Beijing platform of equality, that was in 1980, you get to realize that secondary school enrollment, both female and male, irrespective of region, jumped from 7.2% for female to 27.5%. Thank you very much.
Now to the lady, I would like to ask you the same question. What progress has Uganda made in the quest for gender equality?
Okay, thank you so much. So, as I said, the progress is there because different frameworks have been put for it to be there. Like the Article 21 of the Constitution, it's a law that is which describes the status and the right of equal treatment. So that shows that we are somewhere and we have attained. However, we have not reached to where we have to be. Then women have higher political offices in the current cabinet. We see the Prime Minister, Honorable Rebecca Nabanja. We see the Vice President, Honorable Jessica Adupo. So that shows that we are there compared to the former parliament, which only had 16 members, 16 members, but now we have 22 in parliament. That shows that we are there. Then the different things that have been put there, like political positions that have been put there specifically for women, like women MP, a woman and only a woman can come for such a position. So that shows that we are there according to gender equality. Then the increase in the number of girls joining the education sector, it is increased from, it is now on 5.33%, according to the 2021 status quo. So that shows that we are there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachael. The last one who has not yet spoken is Drake. Douglas Drake, can you tell us about the scourge of the notion that the scourge of COVID-19 lockdowns and the scourge of teenage mothers, was described as a pandemic within a pandemic during COVID-19 lockdowns, and what can be done to forestall that scourge?
Well, it's unfortunate that COVID-19 came and led to high levels of pregnancies that we experienced in our communities. Well, people not going to school means there are other factors that are going to be involved, and yes, pregnancy was one of them. So the best solution that we, or as a country, we facing that particular problem of pregnancy emanates from that. But you can't do away with the pregnancy. We have to deal with it. But then, now, what we have to do is the issue of gender equality, because these girls are still going to be discriminated in their societies because of the mindset. People are used to seeing young girls not being pregnant. But you go, if let's say a girl of 13 years goes to primary school and she's pregnant, she'll be discriminated. Now, how can we change that aspect of discrimination in that particular context? Everyone here, there was a systematic overflow of how they intend to solve the issue of gender inequality. Well, my brother Titus on the other end brought out the idea of, intentional fighting of poverty and the aspect of taking children to school. Well, we can fight poverty, yes, we can take children to school, yes, but why don't we do an overall sensitization of families? Because in a unit of a family, if we are to sensitize these families and have families deeply rooted and teaching families that women have the ability to be equal, women have the ability to also offer what they can offer. We have all talked about, all of us here have talked about equal opportunities, equality of opportunity, that is representation in parliament. We have talked about education, which is very good. But then on the issue of outcome, my brother there also mentioned that over 50% of girls graduate annually, but they do not have opportunity. Now, my issue of equality of outcome, if you have 50% of girls graduating annually, but then they do not have jobs, what is the issue? They come into the job market, but then there's a mindset problem that is with everyone. Now, how can we solve that problem? The issue is, without us not going to school, let us start with families, because it's with the families, if we are to teach people how to respect women, we shall have outcomes in society, such as fairness, we shall have fairness, we shall have health and happiness among people, we shall have limitless possibilities, because people will have the opportunity to equally participate in spaces.
Thank you, Mr. Onen. Pass the mic to Rachael again, and Rachael, I'd like you to answer the same question. Teenage mothers during pregnancy, what can we do to avoid the situation of a lost generation?
Okay. This pardon?
The issue of teenage mothers during COVID-19 lockdowns and what can be done to forestall the situation.
Okay. Different policies have been put in place that actually advocate for women. We have seen the Women Trust policy, which advocates for such. So for such a case of teenage pregnancies, as my colleague has said, it's more of a mindset, yes, like a social mindset. We should first work on the social mindset because it has already happened. We can't actually take it back. It has already happened. But how do we make these teenage mothers also feel in place and part of us, like the different framework I've given you? Then the Health and Safety Act that the Health and Safety Act that provides for like each gender, I think should also be put into consideration, because with so doing, it will be with so doing, like it will be like equipping for even those other teenage mothers. Then there is a case in point where they only groom the girl child and a boy child is not groomed. We have seen different organizations like Save the Girl Child, Girls Not Brides, Global Girls Youth, that only sensitize women and do not sensitize the boys, do not teach these boys more about, that do not teach these boys. If we see that if they are also sensitized, if they are also taught, probably we would overcome, or like teenage pregnancies would be less.
Thank you. Titus, Ngabirano, please answer a question about how to eliminate existing gender biases in Uganda.
First and foremost, the question is kind of, someone might say a hypothesis, because when you say eliminate, you are being very unrealistic. What I would probably expect is, how can we reduce gender biases in Uganda?
So you're saying it's impossible to eliminate?
That is being realistic. Now, moving forward, when you are tackling the part of reduction of gender biases in a country like Uganda, I believe we have to mostly and majorly focus on one strong factor, and that is education. A learned generation can move mountains. Take an example of a student. I would be very surprised when you spend over 20 years in school and you're the person being an aggravator of gender-based violence, because all the education you have attained, it gives you the liberty to understand that me as a person, a woman is an equal and I'm not her superior, irrespective of the cultural norms, the patriarchal society we live in, or probably the things like that. Two, another key aspect that I think we should focus on as a nation is poverty. Irrespective of whether land or unland, the moment you are poor, you are driven to do things you'd regret doing at the end of the day. And that is even reflected when students are broke. Entitlements, that when I empower a woman to be an equal, it does not entitle you to govern me. You get the context. So even when the gender biases are on the road of elimination or reduction, empowerment and entitlement should not be confused and contradicted at the end of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Titus. Oscar, the next question is for you. And I also would like to ask you about the scourge of teenage mothers that worsened during COVID-19 lockdowns, and what can be done to avoid a situation of a lost generation.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank my fellow panelists who have already done justice on what caused the teenage pregnancies. I will just go straight to how do we then avoid going into losing a certain generation. First of all, as I had earlier told you, and as all the other panelists are buying into it, that the biggest problem of Uganda is about mindset change. And that is what we should address most. How does this come into this scenario? For example, now, women or teenage girls who have gotten pregnant, the only way to empower them, if you asked all of us here, would be actually to empower them with education, to empower them with material capital to help them get empowered financially. But how do we then get to empower them with education? Yet there is some stereotypical thinking out there that actually some schools are even holding that pregnant girls cannot study or they are chased out of school. So that's why we should start addressing that. If you get pregnant, do parents still believe that actually if a girl child gets pregnant, she still has value? Of course, no. And that is what we want to address as Kabale University. Let us go back to the roots and educate the people that girls, whether pregnant or not pregnant, still have chances and can develop and can actually come up. Let us go and tell the school administrators and policymakers in the Ministry of Education that a girl who is pregnant can also go to a class and is supposed not to be chased from a secondary school setting, because yes, some things happen and everyone deserves a change to do what? To recover. But those chances, the second chances, are always limited by that mythical beliefs, those mythical beliefs that are actually not worth it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Oscar. And now Ogutu Titus. Your question now is about the progress Uganda has made in the quest for gender equality. No. Sorry, I asked you that question. Let's talk about what it takes to eliminate gender biases in our society.
Yeah, to be corrected, you didn't ask me that question, you just changed. So, gender biases. When we are talking about gender equality or anything to do with gender, it's not even a technical issue that we need experts. I'm still wondering why we still have the 75 million. What is it going to do? This is an issue that just needs overall dynamics that comprise a society, okay? So when you talk about the biases, for example, let me give an example of we, the gentlemen. If a gentleman is walking and the short is maybe cut and the new boxer is being seen, they will say those are typical, that's how boys behave, okay? But when the girl is moving in a funny way, they will say, look at how she's walking, you're spoiled, you know? So some of these unconscious biases need to be addressed, first of all. And when we need to address the structural inequities that do not amplify the voices of some of these girls and boys, you know. So we have these parents who think that actually some of their children are not capable of doing certain things. And I think that is a backward mindset that we need to improve. So coming back to mindset, to be a little bit unique, you know, it's funny to sit here and look at you all and tell you that we need to change our mindset. What is mindset, first of all? Okay? So when you are going to talk about mindset, let's start with the organizations that are going to implement. Let them have a productive mindset. You know, Uganda, we are too fixed to one thing. That's why we have so many policies. We are looking at them, singing about them, but they all symbolize to the international community that, yes, Uganda is doing well. We have a 44% cabinet. You know, we have a parliament with close to 34 women are there. But do these numbers even translate in the quality of life to the rural woman in Kabale here with my brother? So we need to amplify some of these structural inequities that do not amplify some of these voices to come out. Now, to speak about unconscious bias, I think the discussion is that gender equality should be correlated with equity. Let's have fair treatment between the genders, okay? So because with equity, you're going to have access to equal opportunities with respect to the differences between the two. I would really like to make a comment. I don't know if you just give me 5 seconds. Yeah. Say, to resolve on the unconscious biases, we need to ask ourselves one question. A society that is going to maximize equal opportunities between the genders, what is the answer to that society? That society should maximize the choices of both genders. And to maximize both choices of genders, that society should be able to maximize the difference in choice of the genders.
Your 5 seconds.
So, those two cannot move together, but they need to be taken into consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Titus. Yes, you're right, I hadn't asked you the other question. The problem is having two Tituses on the panel, but Simon, what progress has Uganda made in the quest for an equal world for women and men?
I beg your pardon?
What progress has Uganda made in the quest for an equal world for women and men?
I think Uganda has made some baby steps towards attaining the equality that we all want. Much as we advocate, okay, we can point out some of the shortcomings of the affirmative action. It's still commendable that you have a fair number of women in parliament. It's still commendable that you have a 43% of the cabinet for females. It's still commendable that the leader of government business in parliament is a female, the vice president, and then the speaker of parliament. It's very commendable. When you give the girls examples like these ones and show them that you can get there, people have, then you're really making a good step towards that. The universal primary education has given girls an opportunity to go to school and attain at least wherever they stop, they've given them that. I think the reason we talk about this thing is not so much to castigate the government, but maybe to point out where they've gone wrong. So I don't want somebody to look at what I've said in my first speech as a contradiction to whatever I'm saying today. We commend these things. There are girls that are at campus because of the points they give them. There are girls that are at campus because of the evening classes. They can do their other things and then return. Then Uganda has also tried and moved some good steps towards abolishing some of the cultural practices that were against girls. I think we have put that energy into that, and as much as it's not enough, we can at least say they've made some baby steps.
Okay. You're done. Thank you. Can you please move the microphone up to Mr. Onen? And I would like you to answer the same question. What progress has Uganda made in the quest for an equal world for women and men?
Back to what I said, equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. Uganda has made some strides. However, globally speaking, gender equality is still a fundamental impediment towards human progress. So Uganda making some steps means we have spaces or we have representation, such as in Uganda. In 1962, we only had two women in parliament, and as opposed to the current 120 plus women representatives in parliament. Now that shows that we have made some tremendous steps. That shows the equality of opportunity that we're talking about. Looking at other spaces as well, economically, women are CEOs, women are running businesses. That shows Uganda has made some progress. However, looking at the equality of outcome, if currently we have in my university, even many universities, women constitute majority in our lecture rooms. What does that mean? The boy child is now actually in class, there are fewer. The women have got the opportunity to attain education, and yet when they come out of universities, 50% do not get the employment opportunity. You know, human rights approach to development looks at participation, looks at accountability, looks at non-discrimination and all that. Now, if all these girls come out of school and do not get employment because of the gender equality issues, like sexual harassment among others, then the issue of equality of outcome comes in. The issue of the mindset that is in the society. Because if the mindset of people are in a particular way held bent that women are this and that, then we need to come up with a solution, of which the solution that I provided was, the first important thing we need to do is focus on families. Families are the smallest units in the community that would help bring up children that would for generations look at gender equality. Because we're not only looking at short term. You can get the education, we do agree, get the education, fight the poverty, but we need to look at the smallest units of the community, and that is the families. So if we solve that, then we are going to make very tremendous steps. However long term it is, for the future generations to come, we would have done our part as the present generation and made good steps. So back to the question, Uganda has made some progress, but on the other part of equality of outcome, we need to do much on that.
Okay, please stay with the microphone and answer your last question for the session. what would it take for Uganda to eliminate the existing gender biases?
It still brings me back to my solution, family. You see, when I come here, I subscribe to the sociological school of thought that society progresses. And in a progressive society, we have people that have minds that, are able to take in things in a positive way. Now, in this 21st century, we have mindsets, or we still have mindsets that still discriminate against women. So, the solution that I offered, one, was the issue of what? Family. So in us enabling or us sensitizing families and making families remove away that particular mindset against women, that will make us go a very tremendous step towards elimination. As he said, he wouldn't go with the idea of elimination because it's impossible. But as I said, I subscribe to the sociological school of thought. Progress can be made, and actually, we can actually attain gender equality. I would love to believe so, with the smallest units of the with the smallest units of the community, and that is family. So if we set on those families, focus on the families, have the mindsets of kids that are growing up changed, take them still in school and teach them the same, then don't you think we are going to have a community that is equal? Because that is what we're looking at. And lastly, something that arose. I am a boy child, and it saddens me if I'm in a university whereby the boy child are no longer being positioned to get into universities because girls have the 1.5 weight. And because me, I cannot maybe attain the particular point, and I do not have the particular weight, and I'm left out because I do not have that. The topic of discussion today is gender equality, regardless of sexes. I want us to eliminate the idea of only women. Boys are also there. So if we are to discuss gender equality, we look at both the women. I know the women are the most marginalized, but in a progressive society, we are going to solve this problem 5 steps forward. The boy child will be neglected, 10 steps backwards. So let us also put that in point. Thank you very much.
Please pass the mic to your neighbor. Rachel, I would like you to answer the same question. I will repeat it if you have forgotten it. What would it take for Uganda to eliminate the existing gender biases?
Okay. First of all, as Simon had said, there are already some, there are policies that have been done. Yeah, some policies, a policy of the 1.5, adding on the girl, then the other policy I said of specifically giving women positions in the parliament, like women MPs and all that. So what should Uganda do to eliminate these gender biases? First of all, I think we should, Uganda should work on the different cultural practices that actually there are different cultural practices that blind women to be subordinates. For example, the local marriage counselors, in brackets, Sengas, where they still tell ladies that it's okay for a man to actually beat you and harass you and you move on. Campaigns should be put against this so that by so doing, we shall be eliminating gender equality. Then the gender equality today is now, as more organizations have come up to fight for the girls' sex, now we realize that the boy gender is being left out. A boy would find it hard to come out and talk in publicly, talk publicly that they were sexually harassed, and they would even society perceives that as a very shameful thing. Yet they can also be publicly harassed. We do not see any act in the Uganda Penal Code Act that talks about that on the side of boys. There is let me finish. There is no account. There is no law that talks about rape on the boys' side. Yet they are also for us to come out. For us to eliminate gender equality, for gender equality to be worked on, at least a policy or a law should come up.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. Your neighbor, Titus. Titus, your last question for today is about teenage mothers that emerged during lockdown, what can be done to forestall the situation?
For starters, have we embraced the teenage mothers, yes or no? And the answer in very many contexts is a no. So what we should first do is embrace the teenage mothers who have already been there. Now, as I said, we have a patriarchal society, and is also very much driven by bias. You get to realize that even at university, when students see a female lady pregnant, they become so judgmental. Now, with that already in mind, are we embracing the teenage pregnancies? Two, we are not losing a generation. It is our minds that are losing a generation. Because if you have a child and you have decided to keep the child, what justification do you give me that I'm going to lose a generation just because a teenager gave birth? It zeroes down to mindset, and at times, these are some of the things that make us need that 78 million in the budget for mindset, because people at the end of the day fail to interpret and comprehend issues in a more free state. Because I believe that if a girl child is already pregnant, either willingly or unwillingly,